Yeah, they're jumping right in with 1-1. You wanna explain 1-1 a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, our runners today are Bulbasaur Represent and the Mad Wasp. They're two of our highest level runners. They've been at the top of the leaderboards for almost a year. I think maybe currently fourth and fifth or third and fourth, if I can remember. 1-1 is a pretty basic level. You can see we plant the pea shooters right there in columns 7 and columns 8. When we refer to the columns, we're going to be going left to right. And you can see what that does is that minimizes the distance that the peas actually need to travel. I've noticed that we calculated that the speed that the peas travel at about 1 square every third of a second, or about 3 squares per second. So basically the balance here is just getting the peas as close to the zombies without losing any of them. And wow, this is amazing. You can actually see that they clicked up at almost exactly the same time. That's actually fairly rare, given that there's actually some RNG in terms of how quickly the sun falls from the sky, as well as some other mechanics about where specifically the zombies spawn on screen. So the zombies will always spawn at the same time, but their X position changes based on some RNG factors. So that would be basically their X coordinate position. So sometimes they appear basically very far off screen, and sometimes they appear a little bit closer. And there's also variables based on the zombie speed themselves. So the easiest way to describe it is if we say that the zombie speed is a default of 1, the zombies can be as slow as about 0.71 or as fast as 1.29. So there's almost a factor of 2 difference between the very slowest and the very fastest zombies. And you can actually see that right here as we begin 1-2. The Mad Wasp had a little bit of bad RNG in terms of the first zombie appearing in the same row that he planted his sunflowers. And that actually brings us to our first point. You'll notice that they're playing a different strategy, and that's based entirely off of where the first zombie appeared. If the zombie appears in the top row, then obviously they need to kill it to avoid losing their sunflower, versus if the zombie appears in any other row, then you can see that they actually let the zombie go to be defeated by the lawnmower at the very end. So this is a strategy we implemented maybe about a year or a year and a half ago that can really actually speed along a level pretty well as Mad Wasp on your left here begins to loses a zombie, but should be okay. And you can see that Bulba's RNG, the fact that that first zombie was able to walk through and get to the lawnmower, you can see that actually sped along his level by enough, because he was able to plant a few more sunflowers a little bit quicker and get out more pea shooters, which of course means more damage and zombies dying a bit faster.
Yeah, and as you can see, each runner kind of hops between each level really fast. And the reason why they're able to do that is because they hold the space bar, and that is basically a way to tell the game that you want to skip through any dialogue or any in between level stuff. And so we don't actually have to look at the you got a new plant screen if you just hold space between levels, which definitely speeds things up.
And one factor that really becomes apparent here at the very beginning is some of the factors of what we broadly call sun RNG. So basically, at the beginning of the level, the amount of time that it takes the first sun to spawn fall from the sky is a random number between 4.25 seconds and 7 seconds. And so, as you might imagine, you want more sun faster. And so your ability to plant subsequent plants sort of largely varies based on whether you get that 4.25 second drop or all the way up to 7 second drop. So again, if you're always kind of lagging towards the end, sort of your natural sun production is going to be a little bit slower, and ultimately that can affect the decisions that you make in a level. And so if that weren't complicated enough, when a sunflower gets planted, the amount of time until it produces its first sun is another random number that's set between 3 and 12.5 seconds. And you can see that the sunflowers glow for 1 second before it produces a sun, so you know when it's going to happen next. But you can see that there's huge variability between that early sun RNG. And then after it produces its first sun, every subsequent sun will be produced anywhere from 23.5 seconds to 25 seconds. So, long story short, in other words, it becomes very, very difficult to have a perfectly uniform, consistent strategy in this game for several reasons, not the least of which is the sun RNG. And again, as we can see demonstrated here in 1.3, you can already see that the runners have totally changed their strategy. This isn't because they have, necessarily different overall strategies to take advantage of in the game, but rather because the game, based on, again, the sun RNG and the speed of the zombies and what row the zombies appear in, all of which again is affected by RNG, they sort of have to dynamically change their strategy in order to adjust.
Yep, indeed. Should we explain the 50% rule real quick here?
Yeah. So
again, the most important part of speedrunning this game, I'd say.
Absolutely. So the most one mechanic we learned about 10 months ago is what we call the 50% rule, and you should be able to begin to see that a little bit more as we enter 1.4 here. What the 50% rule is basically when wave, we'll call it wave X spawn, so say wave 1, there are two factors that will lead the next wave to spawn. The first is if you do between 35 and 50% of the current wave's total hit points. So in other words, if you have one zombie and you do a random number between 35 and 50% of that zombie's hit points, the next wave will spawn. Or if if you wait between 25 and 31 seconds, then the next wave will spawn. So you can't just ignore the zombies indefinitely, or if you choose to, the next wave will eventually spawn. And then once you kill that particular wave, then that wave's hit points no longer matter. So once wave 2 spawns, then all you need to worry about is wave 2's hit points. And so you can actually see that both Wasp and Bulba are only dealing with wave 2. That's because all they need to do now is deal with up to 50% of wave 2's hit points, and then wave 3 will spawn. And now you can see they only need to deal with up to 50% of wave 3's hit points, and then wave 4 will spawn. So as a result, again, this game becomes not an auto-scroller, but rather a battle between how do you balance, your sun production, i.e. how many and how frequently do you plant sun, versus how quickly do you try to kill the zombies that appear on screen. So you'll hear us refer to the 50% rule quite a lot this game, because it's basically the most important mechanic in the game, simply because it's really the one thing that allows you to go faster. In other words, the faster that you kill wave 1, the faster wave 2 will appear. The faster you kill wave 2, faster wave 3 will appear, and so on.
Yep. Looks like Bulba was able to make use of... Looks like both of them were actually able to make use of the lawnmowers pretty effectively, but Bulba's case was a little bit more forgiving because it actually, I believe, activated the 50% rule, whereas it just killed the Conehead, which had already activated it for Wasp's side.
Exactly. Another factor that you'll see that comes into the RNG is that the types of zombies that appear in each wave. So there are a few known factors, that being that in wave 1, there's always going to be a normal zombie. Wave 2, there's always going to be a normal zombie. Wave 3, there's always going to be a normal zombie. But in wave 4, there's a 50% chance that you'll get a Conehead and a 50% chance that you'll get 2 regular zombies. And it's a bit interesting because the Coneheads have 27 hit points, and each regular zombie only has 10 hit points. So there are actually some situations where it's better to get a Conehead because it's easier for you to deal with a single zombie that has 27 hit points as opposed to 2 regular zombies that have 10 hit points. But obviously then the total of the 2 zombies is potentially less than the 27 hit points. So again, the RNG can come into to factor here in terms of not only the sun RNG like we were talking about and the zombie speed that we were talking about, but also what types of zombies you get in what waves.
All right, 1.5. Everyone's favorite level.
Oh yes, yep. So again, if we didn't feel like RNG was quite enough of a factor, we have 1.5 coming up right here. There's sort of a quick demonstration of how to dig up your plants. This is the first level that you have access to the shovel, although we don't use it on this level. In 1.5, it's sort of what we call our first auto scroller, and that's where you don't. Yep. Oh yeah. You don't get to select your plants, but rather the game gives you these walnuts, and you basically bowl them like you would. I guess more candlepin bowling maybe than other types of bowling, but that's I might have my New England roots kind of coming out here. And this is really where you get a great demonstration of the 50% rule. You'll see that our runners are really trying to focus down the high hit point zombies that just appeared on screen, because once they do enough damage to that wave, then the next wave spawns, and so on, as we discussed with our 50% rule.
All right, looks like both of them are going to get pretty good numbers of Explodos, which is fortunate.
There's a 85% chance that you get a regular walnut, and a 15% chance that you get an Explodonut. And the Explodonuts, of course, are very good because they kill multiple zombies as opposed to needing to rely on bounces. And there is a little bit of RNG as it relates to bounces as well. If you place it,
Wasp caught up a lot there. All right, yeah, go on.
Yeah. Wasp, Wasp really did a good job catching up. He did. Both runners have about 2 Explodos, I think, heading into the final wave here.
Now.
Yep. Getting back, and again, that just sort of demonstrates that RNG can get you back in the game. But again, we talk about RNG a lot, but I think what makes this game, my favorite speed game overall, is that overall throughout the course of a run, we find that the RNG really, there's so many RNG factors that it all sort of averages out at the end, and that the runners that. Even though RNG sort of can affect the game on a micro level, on a larger, more macro level, it's ultimately the runners that make the better decisions based on the RNG that they get that end up with the better time throughout the course of the 3.5-hour run.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly, Bulba did not get great luck for the very first zombie. You really don't want that first zombie to show up in the same row as you plant your first sunflowers, because then you're not going to be able to let it go to the lawnmower and not deal with it. You have to deal with it head on, and that usually means using a potato mine, but it definitely slows things down a lot.
Absolutely. So again, there's basically a 1 in 5 chance that a zombie will appear in any particular row at the very beginning. But then afterwards, the game decreases the probability of getting zombies in the same row and increases the probability of getting zombies in rows that have not had a zombie recently. So again, looking at Wasp's screen, there was a very, very high probability that because he hadn't gotten a zombie in rows 1 and 5, that the wave that he got was going to be either row 1, row 5, or both. You can see Wasp, because he did get the slightly better RNG scenario of being able to let that first zombie go, that he was able to plant a walnut to basically stall out the zombie there. So what he's doing there in that 4th row is waiting until he gets a high hit point zombie, which he got right here with the vaulter. Vaulter. It looks like he's tried to jump over it, but he does actually still have a hitbox at that point. Basically he's able to, and you can see Bulba doing the same thing right here too, stalling out the zombie before it uses the lawnmower, and then once you get the lawnmower, using it against the zombies to speed along things a little bit more. We sort of call that the value lawnmower, being able to hit 2 or even 3 zombies with the same lawnmower. You can see both runners here, again, trying to deal with basically any time that you see a conehead, there's going to be a 50-50 chance that it's going to be a conehead versus 2 regular zombies. So this is another example of where you want the coneheads to be used against these sort of forward-facing potato mines, which kill most zombies in 1 hit. Again, as opposed to you can see hopefully that Cherry catches everything. But Wasp just missed the much faster Vaulter zombie. Again, the zombie's speeds can vary by as much as a factor of 2. So again, it can be very tricky to sort of make sure that the speed of the zombie is appropriate relative to the amount of damage that you're doing to it. So definitely Wasp. Overall, you can see where his slightly better RNG at the beginning of the level, combined with his excellent use of the lawnmowers, helped him complete the level maybe about 10 to 15 seconds faster than Wasp. But again, that's just that's just sort of one RNG case in one level. And again, these two runners are extremely close. They did a practice run yesterday and finished the 3.5-hour run within a minute of each other. So again, I'm expecting a really good race today. Some really good competition, some back and forth. We've already had 2 lead changes, and we're just 15 minutes into this thing. So again, there's a lot of game to play, and a lot of very fun action for the rest of the run here.
All right, 1-7 time. So because the snow peas slow the zombies down, they're actually a little bit less useful to us than they might be casually. They're super useful casually, but they just kind of go against what we are trying to do here. But we still use them on this level because we need that extra firepower and because of the recharge of the pea shooters. So, but we do try to place them further in the back so that their slowing effects aren't as pronounced.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember loving the Snow Pea in casual play, because it does slow down the zombie speed by a factor of 2. But of course, in a speed run, slowing the game down is not exactly the most advisable strategy. So, sort of just as Super was saying, we use a combination of regular peas as well as snow peas in order to maximize the the total damage output, because a snow pea has the same damage as a regular pea shooter. So from a pure DPS standpoint, there's really no difference between using a regular pea shooter and a snow pea, aside from the fact of being able to slow the zombies down, potentially bunch them up a little bit more, and take advantage of sort of using the limited space to plant the plants that you're given.
Yeah, I don't think we ever used the snow pea voluntarily though in a level, which is a little bit sad.
Yeah, it is very sad. The snow pea, there's a few plants that unfortunately very cool plants, but they don't get a lot of love in a speed run.
Oh, no.
Yep. And it's very interesting because when we talk about strategies in general, I remember, I've been playing this game for maybe about 10 years. I think it's 2011 maybe when I got the Game of the Year edition for the first time. It was, the run at that point was, I think the world record was 3 hours and 55 minutes. And since then we've improved it by over half hour. And that not just comes from, better execution and better decision making, but we've actually changed the strategy in 49 out of the 50 levels in the last 2 years or so since I've been running the game. So again, that just goes to show that there are very small things that you can do, not only to improve individual execution within a level, but we've had some pretty major strategy discoveries and strategy improvements. Some of them as little as maybe helping you a couple of seconds per level, and a few of them that have helped us, believe it or not, in well over a minute per level, whether that's taking a different plant, using the plants in a different way, using our instance differently, things like that sort of affect the overall strategy going into a level. So again, you may be watching this game kind of being like, oh, why do they do this or why do they do that? And that's not to say that we have all the answers. I'm quite certain, in fact, that we don't. And there's still some mechanics that we don't fully understand, or are able to sort of use to their greatest effect within the game. But there's usually a reason that we do everything, or that we plant plants in a certain way. Or you can see here we probably use a lot more sunflowers maybe than you're used to in casual play, but that's okay. Just given that again, we're really looking to plant as many offensive plants as we can, and no better way to do that than by planting the sunflowers.
And on the Wasp side, we see the glitch as well, the potato mine and the walnut strat. where the actual the hitbox of the potato mine is kind of a full tile. So even though zombies can't activate it from behind a potato mine, they could still get caught in the crossfire of it. So
basically, when the vaulter vaults and he runs into another plant in the next tile, part of his hitbox is still on that tile that interacts with the potato mine. So as a result, if you're able to use a potato mine, if you're able to get a zombie from behind that to activate the potato mine, the total damage that's done will affect the vaulters that are in front, as well as the zombies that ran into it from behind.
Sadly, Wasp does get that zombie in the middle row, but let's see what Bulba over here. Hopefully, he will be a little bit more lucky.
You can see there's probably about 15 to 20 seconds separating the runners at this point, but again, potentially that RNG of the zombie appearing in the middle row for Wasp, that could be enough to potentially even things up by the end of this level. So interesting that the zombie appeared in the bottom row for both of them. Again, this game is what we call non-deterministic, meaning that just because that you saw again the zombie appear in the fifth row this time, the next time you play through the game it could be completely differently. So it could be completely different. So even on a level like this that has what we call 10 waves or a single flag. There's basically 5 to the 10th different possibilities of zombies appearing in the different rows. It's probably technically a little bit different than that based on the game sort of dynamically changing some of the probabilities, but that just sort of goes to show that even though it looks like you should be able to find a perfectly optimal strategy for every row. As you can see, Mad Wasp here making great use of that lawnmower to kill the very high hit point Buckethead that's in the bottom. It's still, again, that non-deterministic nature of the game is one of the things, in my opinion, that makes it so beautiful to speedrun, is that it really is a decision-making speedrun and really sort of very, very unique, very, very one of its kind. That really, you can try to learn, okay, if the first zombie appears in this row, then you do this. If the second zombie appears in this row, then you do this. But when it comes down to it, there's simply so many possibilities that there's almost sort of like a feel or an intuition that you get to the game in order to to maximize the effectiveness and speed the game along as much as you can.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see.
One thing I believe we've maybe forgotten to mention is that on once you use one of the lawnmowers, the game is actually generous to you and does not spawn zombies in that row for the next 2 waves. So you can see as Bulba uses a lawnmower right before the final wave, that means that the final wave will not have any zombies in that row. And you can actually see that he lined that up just right, such that the top row and the bottom row had a recently used lawnmower, so he was able to eliminate all of the zombies at the very end just with the use of one cherry.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Fortunately, both were lucky enough to not get them in the same row as the sunflowers. Also slightly different strat here with 2 runners putting them in slightly different rows, although I don't think on 1-9 it makes a huge difference either way.
Yeah, 1-9 is interesting in that, again, our goal is to actually let the first 2 zombies go through. That's because we take the repeater, which which costs more, but basically makes better use of the space. And sort of the reason for that is that this is the first, or I guess it's the second, but it's the first level that we have the repeater, but that is also 2 flags. So the way the flags work is that there are 10 waves of zombies per flag. And the only exception to the 50% rule is that on the 9th wave, you need to eliminate all of the zombies before that huge wave will appear, the 10th wave or the 20th wave, and so on. So in this level, taking the repeater is nice because it's a bit of a longer level. And so as a result, we plant a few more sunflowers, and we have some higher cost plants, the chomper and the repeater, in order to sort of make up for the fact that the level's a little bit longer and we have more sun to use throughout the level.
Yeah, casually, if you had told me that the fastest way to play this level would be to have 4 columns of sunflowers, I would have been like, I would not have known how to use all that much sun, but we definitely make use of it speedrunning.
Absolutely. That's sort of one, we have newer people joining our streams on Twitch. That's sort of one of the first comments. You guys plant so much sun, but you'll notice that they really do use a lot of it. Sort of what our general rule of thumb is that it takes the sun about a minute in order to produce more sun than it costs to plant it. So again, based on those, as I mentioned earlier, so some of those 20 to 25 second intervals that the sun produces, you want a sunflower is basically worth it if it produces, at least 75 sun, which of course is more than you spent on it. But of course, there's an opportunity cost that as you use 50 sun to plant a sunflower, that could be less sun that you have in order to deal with a particular wave. So there really is a very delicate balance between, how much sun that you want to plant to help you later on in the level versus how many offensive plants you use early in the level to deal with those early waves. I don't think I said that as well as I could have, but I hope that makes sense.
All right, moving right along through 1.9 here. Definitely make note of the fact that the runners use the chomper a lot, because even though it is 150 sun, the fast recharge means that you can deal with those high health zombies very quickly and really speed along that 50% rule.
Basically, the 50% rule does have a minimum, meaning that there's at least 6 seconds for every wave. And interestingly, the chomper has a recharge time of 7.5 seconds. So basically, as soon as you learn about the location of the higher hit point zombies and you plant a chomper and use it, that basically very well aligns with the minimum amount of time that you need to spend on each wave. So the chomper, again, is not a plant that most of us necessarily would have used casually, but is a plant that has a lot of value for a speedrun, again, because of its relatively low cost and the fact that it basically can deal with 50% of the current wave's hit points, i.e. the 50% rule, much more quickly than most other plants can with that low of a recharge time.
Yep. Moving into the final wave here. Both runners still pretty close, although Wasp is taking a small lead. Pretty good final wave as well for Wasp, so
and
on to 110.
Yeah, the chopper, as you can see, really helps the final waves by quite a bit because the cherry bomb has a 3 square by 3 square radius. So you can plant the cherry in wherever the highest hit point zombies are and then use the chompers to sort of clean up whatever zombies are left behind.
Yeah, and 110 is the first time we get to see kind of the RNG manipulation of the conveyor. And so casually you might be led to believe that this is just completely RNG in whatever plants you get. But we looked at the source code, I believe it was MSBM team, found the source code for the web version and found that if you actually don't use a plant and you let it sit on the conveyor, then it will, it has a less likelihood of actually coming again, so you can get different kinds of plants that way a little bit more easily.
Exactly, yeah. So in order to sort of give some more, basically he was able to analyze the source code of the Flash version of the game that was, hosted on some websites long ago when they were first sort of demonstrating the game. And, we found the source code was really pretty much in line with sort of the final version of the game that was released for most of the platforms. So there's sort of default probabilities that are assigned to the different types of peas that you can get in this level. So in other words, the pea shooter is 20%, cherry bomb's 20%, walnuts 15%, repeaters 20%, snow peas 10%, chompers 5%, squash is 10%. With the squash not applying to this particular level. And basically, if you have 2 or more seeds that are on the conveyor belt, you don't, there's not necessarily any change to the probability, but if there's 3 or more of them that are on the conveyor belt, then it immediately sets the probability weight down to 5%. And if there's 4 or more of them on the conveyor belt, then the probability gets set down to 1%. So in other words, once you have, say you don't want walnuts, once you have 4 walnuts that are sort of lined up in your conveyor belt, then the probability that you'll get another one gets reduced all the way down to 1%. So if you're able to, as you can see here, you'll see our runners being a little bit more aggressive than maybe otherwise you'd think that they should be with the cherry bombs, and that's because the more cherry bombs you use, the more you're likely to get, and the less walnuts, for example, that you use, then the fewer that you get. So in other words, I sort of put this as an analogy to I was definitely the kind of kid growing up when I was playing RPGs. I'd save all my elixirs for the final boss, right? Maybe I'm gonna need this later. Maybe I'm gonna need this for a really, really hard boss, at the very end of the game. And you sort of I had to force myself to get out of that mentality when I started running this game and when we learned about this mechanic, because you really don't want to save your high value and your very important plants. You really want to use them as fast as you possibly can, because you're sort of hurting yourself in the future if you don't use them.
Yep, indeed. But the one drawback is that there is, the inevitable time where you're just not going to get that cherry that you need for the final wave, and you're going to lose a little bit of time. But on the whole, it speeds things up a lot more to just use them throughout the level, because you usually do end up getting it.
So you can see that each of our runners are sort of trying to make that delicate balance right here. They're trying to say, okay, even though this is an auto scroller and I'm not, I don't get to control what plants I get. What you can control is when you use them and sort of how how that affects the probability later on in the level. You can see that Mad Wasp on the left, using 2 cherry bombs on the 9th wave, because you need to eliminate all of the zombies on that wave in order for the final wave to spawn. So basically, he did use both of his cherries, sort of hoping probably that he can maybe get one more. Fingers crossed. Looks like that may not end up happening, but even this chomper here could be very valuable as he wraps up the day levels in a very, very respectable 31 minutes and 49 seconds. Again, the goals for runners around this would be anything sub 32. So I'd say Mad Wasp is doing very well, and Bulba again really only a couple seconds behind, likely going to be in the maybe 32-15 range. So just above where where he'd be shooting for. Again, as we move into the night levels, which once again sort of completely changes the scope and the perspective of the game.
All right, night levels. 2-1 is a little bit. You definitely feel a little bit low on sun the entire level, because sunflowers are not very efficient in the night levels, because it costs all of your sun to just plant one of them, which means that you're really set very far behind in the beginning. So when we unlock the sun shroom, we're actually going to be able to afford a lot more stuff, but for this level, we're going to pretty much have to entirely rely on puff shrooms.
So the game sort of, you'll notice that there's no sun dropping naturally, and of course that's because it's nighttime, so they're not going to give you any naturally producing sun. So sort of in order to offset that, the game gives you really what is arguably the most valuable plant in the entire run, and that's the puff shroom. So the puff shroom has very limited range, only about 3 squares, but its recharge time is so fast, and it does the same damage as a pea shooter, that despite that limited range, it's really just so much more valuable than almost any other plant in the entire run.
Those dang newspaper zombies, although they're actually not even that bad for most, because I think they have about the same health as 2 regular zombies rather than a full Conehead worth of health. Pretty sure.
Yep. Yeah. The game basically it counts the newspaper as a quote unquote shield, and the game sort of assigns different weights to basically defeating the shield of a zombie as opposed to defeating the zombie itself. So it's very, very sort of gimmicky when it comes to the 50% rule. But, long story short, because they have more hit points, it is a little bit more difficult in order to do enough damage to them to move forward with the next wave.
Yeah, and these graves are also going to be a very large factor of how the final waves end up working out in a lot of the night levels. Even when you get the Grave Buster, there are a few levels later on where we're not going to be able to afford it, just because of how short the level is. But it definitely changes the entire scope of the final wave, especially since the cherry only has a 3x3 radius. So managing these final waves is going to be a very big deal going forward.
The graves are a pain in the butt, not only because they prevent you from planting peas in those particular rows, but also because, as you saw from that final wave, zombies appear in those graves for the final wave, in addition to the zombies that you are already going to get for the final wave. So again, the graves definitely have a big factor in the RNG for each level. And you can sort of see that's why the that Wasp here at the beginning of 2-2 is planting some puff shrooms sort of ahead of the graves to make sure that he's able to do damage to the zombies as soon as they get on screen, as opposed to the ideal row to put them in would be row 7, as you can see. Where most of the puff shrooms get placed. But if that's not an option, it's better to plant them in row 8 and be able to do some damage to the zombies as they appear on screen, as opposed to going all the way back to row 6 or row 5 and not needing to wait for the slow zombies to get within range in order to be within the puff shrooms range.
Yep, indeed. And still using that potato mine. And trying to get some predictive kills of some of those early zombies, because it really does help speed things along if you do manage to snag a cone head or a newspaper with one.
And again, the sunshroom, it ends up being more valuable than the sunflower because of its lower cost and the ability to get more of them out sooner. It actually it has a slightly slower sun production rate than the sunshroom, than the sunflower, yeah. But because the sunshroom is so much cheaper and you're able to get so many of them out more quickly, the overall sun production is much higher by using sunshrooms for these levels than it is with the sunflower.
All right, moving into the huge wave here. We're going to get, a lot of zombies. I think there are some cases where it is fast to use the cherry bomb to deal with the huge waves, because it takes a lot longer to deal with them by hand. Whereas I think the chopper is typically a better play for a lot of the in-between stages. And also that was Wasp managed to get a couple of zombies yet again with a potato mine, so showing how useful that can be for only 25 zombies.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, if you hit a cone head or a bucket head with one of those potato mines, or even 2 or 3 regular zombies, as you saw, it really is very valuable. And you'll see here that, again, we're going all the way up to 20 sunshroom production, and that's because, again, we're really looking to plant as many repeaters as we can, as well as use the chompers for the bucket heads. Again, the bucket heads, in comparison to a regular zombie that only has 10 hit points, the bucket heads have 60 hit points. So it's absolutely essential that you get rid of the bucket heads as soon as possible. Really, anything that you can do, it's sort of, if you see a bucket head, it's like a drop everything and eliminate it kind of thing, because almost in every case, when you kill a bucket head, that's going to satisfy the 50% rule and the next wave is going to appear. But if you wait to kill it, quote unquote, by hand, just by using the repeaters and the puff shrooms, it's going to take a long time, maybe 15 or 20 seconds total. And again, in casual play, you can certainly get away with it, but in a speed run, you do that too many times and you start to fall behind.
Looks like both of them are continuing to be very close together, only like a wave apart. So
yep. And I think Bulba, between a very strong final wave that he had in 2-1 and again, really good effective use of dealing with these zombies early here and in 2-2, definitely made up a solid amount of time in these last couple levels for sure.
That was a value cherry bomb on Wasp's part right there. And
yeah, the cherry placement, I find it's very important to be a little bit patient with the cherry bomb. Just make sure that you're planting it. You maximize that 3x3 radius, as you saw Wasp do so perfectly. Try to get really all of those high hit point zombies, because the cherry can potentially do probably 75 or 80% of the final wave's total hit points if it's placed in exactly the right spot. You can see here as we go into 2-3.
This is an intense level right here. There's a
very intense level. It's the first level that we get the screen door zombie. And what makes the screen door zombie interesting is that it only has 10 hit points, but its quote unquote shield, as the game calls it, has the same amount of hit points basically as a bucket head. So if you can, and there's two ways really to deal with that most effectively. The first is by trying to kill it with a potato mine, and the second is to try to kill it with a fume shroom, which basically, I guess the game basically blows through the shield, and you can kill them in 10 hits rather than 60, which is what you need from just killing it with puff shrooms. So you can see the runners are going to try to predict which row the screen door is going to appear in, and we can do that relatively with some consistency. I'd say maybe 50-50 consistency based on the observations that we've had up to that point in the level. In other words, if a zombie appears in row 2 or wave 2 or wave 3, then the probability of it appearing in wave 6, which is when the screen door zombie appears, increases. So you can see Mad Wasp didn't quite get that RNG, so he's going to need to kill it using a fume shroom. But Bulba might end up having some slightly better luck.
Bulba was able to get the cone head with it, so it didn't end up being too slow, I don't think.
Yep, so both runners, again, needing to balance, all right, placing the fume shroom with sun production versus, observing what graves. You can see Bulba has a pretty bad grave layout in the top row. Mad Wasp has pretty bad graves right in those middle 2 rows. And again, all of those things coupled together, affect the decisions that the runners are going to have to make. So again, as we mentioned in the beginning, this game is far from, an auto scroller or something that, just involves sort of a little bit of a little bit of kind of manipulation or planting of plants on the screen in a certain order. It really is a decision-making speed run where every decision that you make is going to be determined by events that sort of led up to that point. As Wasp really makes an excellent cherry right there on the final wave. You can see the patience and the the setup that he had up to that point, really helped him deal with that final wave in no time.
Yeah, and to address something I saw, someone said, why not use both the sun shroom and the sunflower? And the reasoning for that is because seed slots are at a premium. And as we can see, we got the 7th seed slot on this level, which allows us to take the Grave Buster, which will be very useful for getting rid of those graves. But it often is very difficult to make a decision as to what is going to be the most valuable plants to take on any given level. And historically, what we've taken on any given level has also changed a lot throughout the run. So,
absolutely. Yep. So again, there's always kind of an opportunity cost. So you could take the sunflower and potentially increase your sun production. However, you might need to forego the cherry bomb, or you might need to forego the potato mine. And the question becomes, is the amount of sun that you gain, is that new plant that you took on, ultimately saving you more time throughout the course of the level than the one that you sacrificed. And in terms of the the sunflower specifically, because it costs 50 sun, there's actually very few times in the beginning of these levels that we would even have 50 sun, or if we did, we probably have a good use for it. So again, as I tell anyone that sort of has an idea for new new types of plants to take, it's not necessarily that you may not be wrong, and in fact arguably there could be some benefit to that. It's just a matter of it can be pretty difficult to test a new strategy. It's not like you probably couldn't run through the level just once. You probably need to run through it at least 10 or 20 times in order to get sort of an average of all right, how much time do I save, how much time do I lose, how much variance is there. So even if on average it's a little bit faster, if you find that the highs are worse and the lows are better, you still may not necessarily want to take that plant or employ that particular strategy, just given that you want to kind of minimize the variance that goes into your times for each level. So again, you may be right. That it may be worthwhile to take the sunflower, but the question becomes: is what you're giving up? Is that too much? Is that too high a price to pay for the extra sun?
Yep, exactly. And now that we are getting into the second half of the level, now is when we can start really getting out those grave busters, because again, it just speeds up the final wave tremendously to not have to deal with the zombies that come out of them. And I think a glitch, not really a glitch, but more of an exploit that we do see in these levels, and I'm not sure if we've seen it yet, but is that vaulters can actually vault over grave busters, and that can often prove to be very useful, because you can trigger the vaulting and also have an excuse to get another gravebuster out. So we definitely do make use of that if the opportunity arises.
Exactly, yep. And the grave busters, by busting each grave, you now have more space, and space is at a premium in these night levels too. You have more space in order to deal with these zombies. To plant, more puff shrooms, more fume shrooms, and so on. So again, it helps a lot in the final wave. It helps you create more space, and that sort of nicely leads into everybody's favorite topic, and that's money. So you'll notice that there are these little coins that drop, and each of the silver ones is worth 10. Each of the gold ones are worth 50, and the ultra rare diamond drop is worth 1,000. And money does come into play throughout the run, and again, is yet another RNG factor that runners have to deal with throughout the course of things. We need a certain amount of money in order to buy another seed slot in the pool levels, which is the third world, as well as to buy, and I won't spoil it just yet, but a very, very special plant just for the very final 5 levels. We buy a very special plant that again, I don't think anyone necessarily would have predicted, just based on casual play, but we do use the money. There is a store that becomes available to us in just about 7 or 8 levels here, and we do use that money. So the other advantage of busting the grave busters is that you're guaranteed to get at least a silver coin drop, and in some cases you can get a gold coin drop or a diamond drop, which really helps your money problems for the rest of the run.
All right, moving on to 2.5. The one true auto-scroller in this entire game. No matter what you do, the zombies will still come at the same rate, which is a little bit, unfortunate in that you can't really speed it up, but also lucky that you don't have to use like an auto-clicker or something like that if you want to move really fast. But the final wave is not actually an auto-scroller, because what we try to do is we try to bust the graves so that the remaining ones are in a 3x3 kind of box, so we can use a cherry bomb at the very end and kill all of them instantly.
You can see that the game was telling Wasp, it started blinking. It's like, hey, use some of your plants, but the game hadn't given him any sun. Basically, each zombie has a probability of dropping sun after you defeat it, and you can use that sun, of course, to plant your plants. The potato mine having no value, the the Gravebuster having some value because it can help out with the final wave as well as earn you a little bit of money. And as Super mentioned, the Cherry Bomb having value in the final wave that it can help speed it up by about 2 or 3 seconds by cherrying all the zombies that appear in a certain radius.
Yep. And it looks like Wasp is gathering a nice little grave collection right there so that he will be able to cherry bomb it and jump right into 2-6.
Yeah. So again, as we have an auto scroller here, I have an analogy I've sometimes used on screen that what I think, a large number of speedruns, or at least the ones that I watch, it's really, the execution's extremely tight. There's difficult to pull off glitches. I'm thinking, Ocarina of Time, or there's frame perfect tricks. Certainly, original Mario Bros. And I mean, so many other games that have, frame perfect or very frame tight tricks. And interestingly, there's really no frame perfect tricks, and there's really no major glitches to take advantage of that maybe not the average runner couldn't take advantage of.
We got a diamond. Wasp got a diamond.
Oh, yep. We got our first diamond of the day.
Diamonds
very,
are
very lucky.
Extremely useful.
Certainly will solve his money problems for the rest of the run. So
not necessarily. There can still be cases that if you get bad drops with 1 diamond, if you get 2 diamonds, typically that's that's your set.
Exactly.
But 2-6 brings us back to the potato mine strat. And while the runners are setting that up, why don't you continue with your analogy here?
Yeah, so there's really no frame perfect tricks or anything like that. So as a result, sort of the game is very known, and it all comes down to execution with so many runs that we all love, and that's sort of what makes them so impressive to watch. And you initially with Plants vs. Zombies, you might kind of say, that's you don't need to be very good at video games, which I actually consider myself I'm really not very good at video games at all. But one strength that I think I maybe have is that I work in a fairly analytical field, and I studied a fairly analytical degree, and so it really does sort of all come down to that analysis, like being able to take in all these different variables. Again, the sun RNG, sort of the nature of how do you balance plant production with sun production, and how do you deal with different things that the game gives you. It really is sort of a one-of-a-kind speed run as a result of all those things together. So the analogies I sometimes use is that a lot of speed runs are, and pardon me as I kind of music geek out here a little bit, but a lot of speed runs are kind of like classical music, right? You have the sheet music written out in front of you. You have very, very specific notes that you need to play at certain times. You have the volume you need to play, what notes are coming up exactly, and it's just a matter of being able to execute that to perfection. And believe me, that takes tremendous skill, and I could never run a game like Mario 64 or Legend of Zelda or anything like that, like any of those classics, because I'm just not amazing at that execution piece. But Plants vs. Zombies I describe is basically the jazz of speedrunning, that the game has it gives you an outline of what you're more or less going to need to do, but you have to improvise. The entire game is pretty much improvising based on sort of what broadly about the context of the music. So in other words, the game gives you the chord changes, but it doesn't give you any notes to play. And so you need to know, based on those changes and based on how the rest of the band's playing and based on what the audience is hearing and those sorts of things, that you're sort of left in a position of needing to, again, improvise based on the specific situations that you're given. And that sort of requires a very different skill set from most speed games, at least in my opinion. So again, this Mad Wasp clears up to 6 here, a very, very difficult and challenging final wave. So
Yeah.
again, that's really why I love Plants vs. Zombies so much. That again, there's so many factors, so many things that go into the game, and every time you play through the game, it feels different, and it doesn't get boring because you have a different grave layout, you have different sun RNG, you have different zombies appearing on different waves at different times, you have the 50% rule, you have all these things that come together, and it's up to you to deal with it the most effective way that you can. And each one of those things individually may only affect a particular level or a particular wave by just a second or two, but over the course of a 3.5 hour run, it always comes down to the runners making good decisions and executing on the RNG that the game gave you as well as they can in order to come up with the best run that they can.
Yep, exactly. And as we can see here, both runners got relative on this. This is where you can the dreaded 4 stacks and the dreaded 5 stacks of graves. And since you can't place a puff shroom within those, it really slows down the level. If you get like an early zombie or a really early cone head in in a row that's set up like that. So the other level where that can really happen is 2-9, but it looks like both runners got reasonably lucky with 2-7 so far.
So yeah, the game does again take a little bit of sympathy on you by giving you the Scaredy Shroom, which does the same damage as a pea shooter, but only costs 25 sun. And the one disadvantage of the Scaredy Shroom is that if a zombie gets next to it, i.e. it's within one square of it, and that includes diagonally as well, the Scaredy Shroom will basically cover down and go underground, and it'll stop firing. But of course, by using the puff shrooms and by placing them as far back as we do, we're able to sort of negate that fault, and we're able to get a very, very strong plant at only 25 sun. So the Scaredy Shroom is one that we take in almost every level that we're able to take it going forward.
Do we take it in every? I think we take it in every single level going forward.
I think we take it in every level. We didn't used to. There used to be some levels where we felt like we had to sacrifice the Scaredy for some other things coming up in the fog levels, but it's just too good. There's just the amount of DPS that you get for only 25 sun is just way too valuable to pass on. So I think it's one of the very, very few plants that we take on every single level that it's available. Probably the Sun Shroom we do too, and I think the Puff Shroom we also take as well. So maybe there's only a couple, but for the most part, again, a lot of different types of plants get some love throughout the run. But the Scaredy is really a pretty underrated one that, again, in casual play I wouldn't necessarily have considered very viable, but here in a speed run, where you can get a high DPS plant for only 25 sun, it's truly the dream.
Yeah. Interesting how Bulba doesn't have any. He just got one out. There we go. Fume shrooms in this level can be very useful because of the high number of doors that can just show up and kind of ruin your day. Because screen doors are just pretty obnoxious to deal with. They take a very long time to deal with by hand, and they require the fume shroom as well. So generally, the fewer you get on levels like this, the better.
You can see the fumes have a range of exactly four squares in front of them, I guess is the best way to put it. So by placing them in that 6th column, you basically cover every zombie that's going to appear on screen. So that's sort of why we order the plants the way that we do. The Puff Shrooms have a range at 3. The Scaredy Shrooms basically have a range of the entire level. And so by setting it up like this, you're able to maximize the effectiveness of each plant, as well as sort of not putting the Fume Shrooms in a high danger zone of getting eaten by a zombie.
All right, 2-8. Probably the worst of the 3 Puff Shroom strat levels Potato Mine strat level, because with the other 2, there's a pretty easy and clear way of dealing with the threat. In 2-3 of the screen door, you can use the Few. 2-6, you have the football zombie, you can use the Hypno Shroom, but in this level, you get a Dancer Zombie. And Dancer Zombies can be pretty obnoxious to deal with. Luckily, only the center guy contributes to the 50% rule, but it still can really slow things down if he doesn't show up in the row that you want him to. But are they playing on the same version, or
I believe they're both playing on the Game of the Year version.
I know Wasp actually is not on the Game of the Year version. I don't know about Bulba.
Oh, interesting. Oh, maybe Bulba. Yeah. So maybe not. So this is
Commentary
sort of the
far
one.
ahead. Okay. No worries about that. We can delay that. Go on.
Yeah, no. So the game was released in 2009, and obviously it was a relatively small sort of thing, but kind of blew up a little bit. And right around that time, actually, was the same time of Michael Jackson's passing, and so they drew inspiration for the zombies that were here. Or on this particular level, the dancer zombie, obviously it's a not so subtle reference to moonwalking and Michael Jackson. And the game actually had a zombie that really, really did look like Michael Jackson. But that was right around the time of Michael Jackson's passing. And you can understand that, the family understandably was, like the idea of Michael Jackson as a zombie and he just passed away. You can sort of understand that maybe wasn't quite the most sensitive sort of thing that could have happened. And so as a result, the estate asked the developers to sort of go back and, maybe if they could not do that, that would be great. So when the game was re-released for the Game of the Year edition, which is the most, probably the most common, I think, of all the versions, they sort of, as you can see on Bulba's screen, re-inspired it. They sort of just gave him a more generic disco type of outfit that does not, resemble Michael Jackson nearly as much. So that's again one of the fewer differences that that we had. So that the game came up with.
And the old dancer is actually, I think, its mechanics are a little bit different. I don't know if it's necessarily faster, but it's the animations and everything is definitely ends up with slightly different movement and strategies than the 15.
Exactly. Yeah. You can see Mad Wasp, really making great use of the cherry bomb once again on the final wave. Unfortunately, didn't quite get all of the zombies, but back we go.
All right. Oh, and Mad Wasp does end up getting that 4 stack. Not quite as bad as the 5 stack that seems to plague A1, but still kind of annoying.
And Warbeck, no question.
Oh, yeah, true.
But so what we're saying there is you can see that there are 4 graves in the same row in the middle row to start off 1-9, and again that's very unfortunate. Just given that again with the puff shrooms only having a range of 3, the zombies would need to walk all the way to column 7. Which probably takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 seconds. The average zombie takes about 5 seconds to walk across a single square. So that's very unfortunate. Luckily, the first few zombies did not appear in that middle row. Otherwise, it could have been a pretty sad situation for Mad Wasp. But again, this is again what we broadly call grave RNG.
And you can get pretty lucky here. That's a pretty solid grave placement layout.
Almost a perfect grave layout for Bulba, and could potentially help his time quite a bit on this level. You can see that Bulba's balance is much nicer. Only two. There's always going to be 11 graves on this level, but getting a 2, 2, 2, and 3 split, and having those sort of spread out, such that you're able to plant a couple of puff shrooms in each column. That really does make things much better. So again, we could see our runners start to maybe trade positions depending on how well the remaining first half and the second half of this level goes. Again, all these things kind of come together, but you see Wasp reacting pretty well to the middle row, putting just enough firepower there to deal with all the zombies in a pretty quick time, without losing too much in the end. And actually, a pesky conehead on the ninth wave, slowing them down just a little bit, but be able to get into the huge wave without too much issue.
I'm not sure if we've addressed the Doom, but the Doom is our savior, because the Doom very much speeds up the final waves, and even a ton, because even though it doesn't leave a crater, it does destroy zombies in a 5x5-ish radius, and so what that means is that we can just on pretty much every level where we're able to use the Doom, here on out, we're just going to be able to basically demolish the final wave and not really have to worry about it. Although it does get a little bit interesting in the fog levels, as we will see, because there are some cases where we're going to have to time it very effectively in order to actually get it.
Exactly. The Doom is another plant. Casual playthrough, I was like, I can't afford this crater. I can't plant on here anymore. I'm not going to use this Doom. But of course, if you're using it on the final wave, the craters truly don't matter, and the speed that you get from it is just far more valuable than any crater, and the cost is relatively reasonable as well at just 125 sun. That it's usually very easy to save up for that right before the final wave, since chances are you're not going to be planting anything more important than the plant that kills the entire final wave in just one shot.
Yeah.
A diamond for Bulba as well. So I actually think that's that's one diamond drop.
One for each. That is pretty much ideal. You really like to see.
It doesn't affect anything immediately. I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I heard you break up a little bit there.
No. Am I still? Am I good to go?
Yep. You're back. Yep. So, So again, the money that you get, again, this diamond drop worth $1,000 is not going to be anything that affects them right away, but it does potentially affect things a little bit in the pool levels in 3.3 and 3.4, as we'll discuss coming up here in a few levels, but much more so in starting in 5.6, some of the very last levels where we buy again a very special plant to deal with the roof levels pretty effectively.
And heading into 2.10 here, this level can be very annoying as the firepower tends to be a little bit lower than you, at least at the beginning. So sometimes the runners will let some of the first few zombies go. Sometimes they use a Doom on them. The strat kind of varies from player to player. But one thing that everyone can typically agree on is that Ultimate Battle is a good theme. It makes these X-10 levels definitely a great time to play. Although sadly, World 4 and 5 don't have it. Although World 5 at least does have Brainiac Maniac, which is also very good.
Exactly. So we haven't given a lot of love to the music yet, but I mean, clearly one of the most excellent features in this game. I mean, just a absolutely brilliant soundtrack that not only the music, but some of the sound effects and things like that. Like when you hear the Doom go off, like you can almost hear the plant say Doom. Like it's this very deep sound that you just get this almost physical feeling of exactly what the plant is doing for you. So when you couple that with music that's extremely well written and fun and goes with the levels very well and goes with just the overall sort of cartoony fun nature of Plants vs. Zombies in general. I just can't say enough how much I love the soundtrack and the music of this game. It's really just something that keeps me coming back again and again.
Hiroshi Mihara is a true genius.
Absolutely.
Really great work. And so this level, one thing that is nice about it, we do have the opportunity, just as with Dooms in this level, we get to use them pretty often because the game is fairly generous with it. And so that really helps us speed up a lot of the waves here.
Once again, you can see... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the Gravebuster is typically not as prevalent, though, which isn't a huge deal because typically the final wave you can use a Doom, so it's not that bad. But space is at a premium here with all the craters that you end up getting by using Dooms. So it's very nice to at least get several of them so that you can deal with the zombies using Dooms without having to worry about that. So.
Same mechanics that we'd mentioned in 110, the previous auto scroller level, apply here as well. That you can see the runners for the most part are going to be ignoring the ice shrooms. The ice shrooms are kind of cool in that they stun all of the zombies and then slow them down for a couple of seconds. But again, of course, slowing down the zombies does not kill them faster. So as a result, you sort of let the ice shrooms go in order to decrease the probability that you get more ice shrooms in the future, and you try to make sure that you never have more than 2 Dooms in queue, because at that point that decreases the probability that you get the Dooms, and the Dooms, of course, basically immediately will deal with any wave and will satisfy the 50% rule for really any wave that comes up.
Yep, looks like both of them are starting to have problems with finding places to fit the Dooms. We kind of do want that center spot, if possible, to get used for the final wave. So I'm not sure if it's actually shown up yet or how far we are ahead for Diamond. So.
Oh, excellent. Yep. Yep. So yeah, and again, that's why I tend to really prioritize. Oh, I just got the diamond drop on my end, but I really try to prioritize the busting those graves that are really at a premium for Doom Shroom spots. I really try to prioritize those as early as possible, just given that. Again, it is possible to run out of spaces for the Dooms, and you really do want a couple of good spots here for the final wave.
Yep.
And both runners again are probably going to be really within a couple of seconds. It looks like here, able to doom the final waves effectively as we say goodbye to the night levels and move to the characters' backyards, where we have a pool that is right in the middle of our lawn, a very odd shaped pool. And I always sort of wondered to myself, first of all, why do you need 6 lawnmowers? And second of all, why do you put 2 lawnmowers right at the edge of the pool? Like, doesn't that seem like some kind of like electrical hazard, or
pool cleaners are pretty expensive.
Pretty expensive too. I mean, this
$1,000 for just 2. You got to use what you have until then.
Exactly. The economy, the way things are, I don't know anyone that owns, even 2 or 3 lawnmowers, much less 6, so
especially they're all exactly the same kind. I guess they must have been a great deal.
Yeah, it must be Costco members or something like that. But that's
I always go to Costco whenever I need those lawnmowers, It's really what it's done for.
Like, damn, I'm down to like 2. What am I gonna do? Oh, they have a value 6-pack. Here we go. Time to put 5 in the front yard and 6 in the back. So
that's true, and you even do get money.
So yeah, they have gold. Sometimes they have gold buried, basically buried within them. So I mean, these are some real. It's like gotta let me know where these things come up. So yeah, but again, as the runners sort of deal with the first part of 3-1. Again, sort of doing the same strats a little bit that we had in the day level, just sort of with an extra twist to it, that letting some of the zombies go potentially in order to make use of those lawnmowers and deal with some of the future waves more effectively. But you'll notice the game also gives you a lily pad. You can't plant most normal plants in the pool without a lily pad. So coming up here, usually the game doesn't give you any zombies in the pool till at least wave 6, but and sometimes not till wave 7, 8, or even 9. But going forward, you can see the runners sort of starting to prepare for the problems that will inevitably arise in the pool itself. Mad Wasp utilizing a strategy where, dealing with the zombies on land, and you'll see he's going to basically try to use the walnuts to sort of bunch them up in the pool for, again, a special strategy that will come along in the final wave.
And the pool, I feel like, is the most plan ahead sort of all 5, although there is a ton of planning ahead in every single area. the pool is probably the most, because even though it's not as apparent 3-1, we're going to start to get a lot like preparatory instance, I guess, is probably the best way to phrase it. So like the Tango Kelp, the Squash, and all of those we really use at the beginning of kill zombie while building up Sun for the more expensive strategy we'll see here in just a bit, which is using repeaters rather than pea shooters. And so there might be even times where the entire first, before the first flag shows up, we haven't planted a single repeater yet because we've just killed using other methods. So definitely how well you can plan ahead and how you can lay your cards out on the table, especially.
Exactly. I kind of equate it to, you may, people call this a tower defense game, given that, you're trying to protect your house or your quote unquote tower from the zombies. But really what we're playing is a hybrid, not only a tower defense game, but also a real-time strategy game, i.e. with your sunflowers being like your villagers or, your resource producing sorts of things. So definitely an element of real-time strategy there, along with chess, where you have to plan at least 2 or 3 or even 4 waves ahead sometimes. And or maybe like a Magic the Gathering, where you have like a strategy that you're trying to build up for a particular event or instance that's going to occur several turns from the current. So again, it's really a beautifully designed game that really incorporates a lot of those like fun aspects of other types of games, that we know and love. All in doing so, again, kind of with a cartoony fun feel that, again, someone probably as young as 5 or 6 or 7, could play, but still has enjoyment from the old men like me, So, but yeah, again, you can see that the on Mad Wasp screen there, I don't know how far behind I am at this point, but making use of some of those potato mines that he planted several waves before in order to deal with some of the high hit point zombies that occur later on in the level.
All right, moving through 5, definitely started to get out those repeaters. And both of them, if you are a fan of well-organized levels, this game, or speedrunning this game, is probably not for you, because to be fast at this game, you really do have to forgo the, inherent, desire to have really everything organized into neat rows, because it's just usually not going to be faster to do it that way. So definitely, although I absolutely running this game to everyone watching, it's a great. You do have to keep in mind the F2, inhibit that response.
Exactly. Yep. Again, I was definitely the type I'd have, even rows of sunflowers, even rows of snow peas, even rows of repeaters, like even rows of walnuts. Like I'd get it all set up all nice and perfectly. And, that certainly helps in the sense that you're able to sort of fairly evenly distribute your firepower between the waves. But the idea is just that it's actually not faster to distribute your firepower evenly. It's faster to distribute it in a way that satisfies the 50% rule, or in other words, it deals with the high hit point zombies much faster than the slower ones. So that's why you can see Mad Wasp, once you have a repeater in every row, beginning to really make use of that chomper once again, just like we did all the way back in 1.9, to deal with the high hit point zombies, whether that's a cone head or a bucket head, really again trying to maximize the effectiveness of each plant and of all the resources, and trying to find that careful balance of how much firepower, how many repeaters that maybe do more damage over the course of the level, and balancing that with sort of the immediate speed that you get from chompering a high hit point, bucket head or something like that. So again, a lot of decisions that get made. We estimate that there, believe it or not, over the course of this run, we think that there are about 5,000 decisions that each runner needs to make throughout the course of the run. So in other words, like a decision being, do I plant another sunflower or do I plant a pea shooter? Do I use a squash or do I use a chomper? Where do I use this cherry on the final wave to maximize its effectiveness? how can I balance, planning ahead, what can I do to plan ahead for future waves versus, dealing with the issues that are present. So we estimate that there are about 5,000 of those little decisions, again, each of which probably only affects the outcome of the run by a couple of seconds each, but ultimately each one has a favorable or an unfavorable outcome in terms of the time. So again, it's really a lot of fun to sort of play that as a runner, to see what you can do to make each one of those decisions the most effective that you can, and sort of learn from your experience too. A lot of this game, like any speed run, is based on experience. You might say, "Ooh, last time I was a little too aggressive with this level. I used a few too many of the instants, the squashes and the cherries too early. So next time I play through, I'm going to be a little bit more cautious."
Yeah.
So,
and to make reference to something in chat. So on the note of the pool cleaners, and for that matter, the roof cleaners. So we don't typically buy the pool cleaners because the $1,000 is usually not worth it for what the pool cleaners offer us. But when runners do get a large surplus of money, we will actually buy the roof cleaners. And it's a little bit of a meme actually, because they're not usually that helpful, but it is kind of, there are like minor uses as well. So it is kind of, if you just get a ridiculous number of diamonds, there is actually kind of for that.
We do almost have a backup strat that says, okay, if you get so much money that you're able to afford the roof cleaners, there are two levels in particular that I can think of where it is beneficial to let zombies go all the way to the end of the roof and potentially use that roof cleaner to wipe out some waves. We'll talk about those a little bit in more detail when we get to them. But in general, money is very tight. And it almost sort of works out beautifully that probably in 90 or 95% of the runs, the runners do get enough money in order to deal with, in order to buy everything that they need. But, we do need some backup strats. One, if you don't get enough money, and two, if you get so much money that you're able to afford, that extra thing, i.e. the roof cleaner, and being able to make the best use of that.
Yeah, and on the topic of money, as we can see, the runners have different. Bulba was able to afford the 8th seed slot for 3, and Wasp was not. And so this has the impact that Bulba is actually able to take the walnut, which will definitely help him out here in this level, because of the scuba diving zombies, or no, the snorkel zombies, that's their. But it's not actually as important for the next level, 4, because for 3-4, we really want to take that, because the Tangle is just an extremely useful, extremely valuable plant to us. So we actually forego the Cherry Bomb on the 3-4 if we don't have the 8th seed slot by then. So let's hope that, I think Wasp should be able to get it.
Exactly. Yep. So perfect description there of some of the backup strats that we need to undertake, because for 3-3 and 3-4 you may have 7 seed slots like you can see Wasp does, or you may have 8 seed slots like you can see that Bulba does. So again, it's important to sort of be able to you try to route the game a certain way, but on certain levels you need to say, okay, if I have the money, then this, or if I don't have the money, then this. Ooh, it's unfortunate that I don't know how far behind I am, but you'll see the Mad Wasp missed a squash at the beginning of the second flag. Sometimes the squash, we'll say he gets a little bit excited. He gets a little too hyped about fulfilling his destiny of squashing zombies, and it is possible to miss a squash for certain types of zombies, basically that have some iframes. So when the snorkel zombie is jumping into the pool, for example, if you don't quite get him soon enough, you can miss him. Or same thing potentially with the vaulters, or some other situations where basically the squash has to choose between sort of squashing forward or squashing backwards. And I guess that was one thing we didn't talk enough about at 3-2, that we do get the introduction, and those of you that have the emotes in chat, please spam it. We do get the introduction of the squash, which is by far the best plant, just about everybody's favorite plant. And it's not just because for 50 sun you can squash basically an entire square's worth of zombies. You can potentially get 2 or 3 zombies on the same square and deal with them immediately. So there is a very practical use for the squash from a speedrunning perspective, but also because let's face it, it's pretty badass. Like there's no question. Like those squashes are ready to go. They have an attitude. Like it's the kind of thing that if you were looking to if you were gonna mess with someone and you see the squash, you're turning the other way. You're just saying, you know what, maybe this isn't my day. Maybe this isn't the kind of plant I'm gonna mess with. I'm gonna stick with something a little softer, like the sunflower. It's pretty badass. So as a result, the squash gets a lot of love in our community and those watching more casually.
So sadly, I don't have the squash emotes right now.
Yeah, let me see if I can
save my Twitch Prime sub for the winner of this race.
As did I. So
show them a little bit of love.
So the runners, I think,
a little extra motivation.
Exactly. So let me see if I can get some of it here. I don't know then if they'll get it right there, but we have we got some spam. We got some. It's taking a second to connect to chat here on the main channel. But
so while that's happening, I will definitely make note of the Tangle, again being extremely valuable. One of probably the best value plants in the entire game. 25 sun to just instantly kill zombie and without any recharge like the potato, unbelievably useful. So we actually do use that 25 sun plant preemptive Tangle Kelps in the pool as the level progresses, and that kind of helps speed along this early section here, and again kind of helps contribute. We really do have some cases where we're just not going to use that many years in the beginning because we just are really focusing on getting sun up.
Yeah, so again, very, very, very nice to have that extra seed slot there, because you can tell, as you'll see, we really do make use of all 8 of the plants very, very regularly in this level. They all have a pretty significant, probably 10 to 15 second time effect on the level. So in other words, if you don't have enough money to afford that seed slot, then you could be set back 10 or 15 seconds again, just purely due to that money RNG. So really, pretty big impact on the run overall.
It's moving through. Some runners tend to play a little safely on 3-4 because it is a 3 flag level, first of the 3 flag levels, I believe. And so that means that we are going to be this level for a little bit longer, and we're really going to want to get a ton of sun up, a ton of repeaters, and so we can be prepared for the large numbers of zombies that are each wave. The third.
Yeah, I saw a question in chat just about what the shovel does. So the shovel, if you click on the shovel and then click on a plant, you dig it up. So it's a way that if you're like, I planted the wrong plant in the wrong place, or say you have zombies that are going all the way down to the very first column, the very leftmost column, you have a way that you can dig them up and hopefully use something else in order to deal with it. You may be wondering when the runners actually bought the 8th seed slot. So one thing that we do, sort of similar to being able to skip the cutscene in between each level, is by holding Enter, Spacebar, or whatever the hotkey is. You can very quickly skip through Dave's chat at the beginning of each level. So sometimes Crazy Dave has a very interesting role in this game. He's very helpful. He does give you some tips. He gives you some advice. and he does sell you that 8th seed slot. And normally you'd read the chat, hit enter once, read the chat, hit enter once. But by holding enter, you can skip through all of that chat. But what we didn't tell you was Dave's dirty secret, and that is that Dave is a capitalist. I mean, if you think about it, like truly a pure-blooded capitalist, sort of at its very finest. I mean, we have a world here that's been taken over by zombies, right? They're invading people's houses, they're eating plants. I mean, they're just the worst of the worst. You would think that Dave would show a little bit of sympathy for humanity, and if he has something that could help you, he'd give it to you right away, or he'd give it to you for free. But no, that is not the way of our capitalist society. Absolutely not. Dave sells it to you, and if you don't have the money for it, tough crap. You're out of luck as the zombies continue to ravage your lawn and eat your stuff, and ultimately try to eat your brains, which is, it doesn't get worse than having your brains eaten. I'm sorry. So, and Dave's like, no, give me $500 for this seed slot, and if you don't, sorry, it's your brain. It's not my problem. So, Dave, I was thinking about this, as I was, sort of running the game for the first couple of times, and definitely sort of more than negatively affected by some of not having enough money. And Dave might be the true antagonist of this level, thinking about it from that perspective. It's one thing to have zombies trying to eat your brain, but it's another thing to have somebody with the ability to help you, the ability to potentially solve that problem, tell you no, sorry, you can't afford it, away you go. Dave maybe isn't antagonist number one, but he is not necessarily on your side.
I'd say he's probably chaotic neutral.
It's just Dave really doesn't, he's not the greatest guy. He's just looking to make a buck in the zombie apocalypse. So.
I saw someone address a while ago. Bulba squashed something while it was going to go, while the mower was probably going to kill it anyway, and I don't remember seeing it, but I'm guessing that the reasoning was that Bulba really wanted to activate the 50% rule today, and waiting for the lawnmower to actually activate probably would have been a little bit slower. So that would probably be the reasoning.
It can be very challenging to sort of find that delicate balance of, how quickly do I kill away versus having that perfect timing for the lawnmower too. So that's definitely one of the skill components that goes along with this game for sure. That it can be pretty tricky to to make perfect use of the lawnmowers, and sometimes you're just a little bit too early or just a little bit too late, and unfortunately you're sort of left not being able to make the most use of it that you otherwise could have.
Yeah, and on the note of Crazy Dave selling us stuff, we actually did, get access to the shop, or we will, depending on where we are at this point. But yeah, we don't buy anything from him right away. Start buying pretty much every opportunity that we can. But for now, we have to deal with these little zombies, and yet another conveyor level. Try to us.
A very interesting sort of allocation of the 50% rule. So the next wave will spawn if you do 50% of the current wave's hit points. However, the threshold or the time frame for when the next wave appears reduces from, again, 25 to 31 seconds. It goes all the way down to 6 seconds. So in other words, if you don't deal with a particular wave, then in just 6 seconds, the next wave will appear. Versus, you'll see sometimes they use the cherries a little bit early, and that does sort of activate the next wave a bit more quickly. So 3.5 is sort of the one exception to the true 50% rule, at least in terms of some of the specific timing that's given.
All right. Looks like Boba used some lawnmowers. Did not. I think Wasp, I even though he did get a diamond, I think he still might be trying to be a little bit safer with money by not using those lawnmowers. Because you do get the 50 coins per lawnmower, and in cases of pretty tight money, it it ends up being, it can come down to about 50 or 100 sometimes. So
Well, I lost a run one time, missing just $10 for buying a particular
just
plane
one
that I
silver
needed
coin.
there, and ended up costing me 30 seconds on that level. And fortunately, it wasn't a PB, but it wasn't on PB pace. But again, that just goes to show that it's a very, very, very tight window. And again,
So
RNG
Wasp is
kind of
gonna
coming into
no
play
P
here
shooters.
for Wasp, as he really just doesn't have that many P shooters for each of the rows. So you can see him being a little bit conservative, trying to use the cherries at the right time, and kill the remaining waves, by hand with the P shooters if he can. But it's
getting ugly.
yeah, it's really, I don't think I've ever seen so few
This
P
is kind of
shooters
ridiculous.
at this point. At this point in a level, it's really, really very ridiculous. He may not lose a ton of time as a result of it, but I
This
mean,
level's pretty forgiving, fortunately.
exactly, it is pretty forgiving, but it is, it is a risk, and unfortunately, he's here on the 9th wave. You see him using the cherry to the 19th wave to clear out, those zombies and proc the final wave.
You'll see him make a mistake coming up here. He misses a couple zombies with a cherry.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. So they do end up being about neck and neck, as you'll see. In fact, I think that Boba may have taken the lead.
Bulba took the lead by about a half a second, again, as a result of Mad Wasp, probably one, just not getting very many regular P shooters, and sort of needing to use his cherries at maybe less than optimal times. And then obviously number 2 was, again, that very slight misplant.
Boba forgot the reek, though. Interesting.
Ooh,
very interesting. Because
So,
the rake really does help here. So I worry that Boba will probably, squander his lead here, because the rake just is another piece of that kind of puzzle and that thinking ahead chess game that we play on the pool levels, by really trying to get rid of those early ones. And the rake is a crucial part of that for these later levels. And he is also
less familiar
not
with
having good RNG either. So very unfortunate luck for him.
what the rake does, for those less familiar, is whatever zombie is going, whatever zombie is going to appear in the wherever the first zombie is going to appear, there's that rake that appears in the 8th column, and it instantly kills that zombie. And obviously that's very great from a speedrunning perspective, because it's basically a way to kill a zombie without spending any sun at all. So again, very, very, very valuable. But it does cost $200, but it lasts for 3 levels. So really, for a cost of coins that has very little effect on the time, other than the little bit of time that you need to spend physically going and buying it, you're able to kill zombies faster, focus more on your sunflower planting, and it's nice to know particularly where that first zombie is going to appear, and then you'll see the runners planting potato mines proactively in the fronts of each level, in order to plan for those future waves, as we were talking about earlier.
Yep, indeed. All right. Let's see how 5-6 again, really where everything starts to come into play here. You get the Zomboni F6, and a really fun thing that happens with the Zomboni is that I had no clue about this. Really, ever does anyone? Chomper can actually eat Zombonis, and it is really hilarious to see what happens. And also really fortunate for us is that it kind of turns them into not that large of a threat, rather than taking the jalapeno, which, while not bad, it usually is one of the worst instances for speedrunning, because we just don't really ever need to get rid of just one row. So it's definitely great that we have other options.
Yeah, the game gives you the jalapeno, but this is one of the first examples where we don't take the plant that it gives you. You can also, again, as Mad Wasp did, cherry the Zamboni too. That'll get rid of it. So there are a few. I remember panicking a little bit in casual play the first time I saw a Zamboni, because they have a lot of hit points, and they really mess up some of your rows by quite a bit by basically paving ice across your lawn, and then you can't plant anything in there, and it increases the chances then that you get bobsled zombies. So in other words, they can really turn a particular row into quite the problem. But again, we do have about 3 or 4 solutions that we take to the Zambonis. Trying to always make sure that we have one bit, in reserve. For those waves that either we know we're going to get a Zamboni, or for the final wave, where you always get one, or if the game decides to be a little bit of a pain and give you an early one.
Yeah. An interesting strat difference that I've noticed is that Bulba, his later sunflowers in the pool, while Wasp is placing them a little bit closer to the front line of defense. And so there are trade-offs to either way, because if you place them, where Wasp is placing them, then they're a little bit more susceptible to attack, but Bulba's is a little bit more expensive. So I'm not actually sure which one is faster.
Well, yeah, what I tend to find, and again, I haven't fully integrated it into some of my strats yet, I do think it's probably better for level the Wasp strat is probably better for levels like this, where you're never that low on space, and you're really you're not at too much risk of losing a sunflower, but on some of the other levels that have things like vaulters, or you need the space, you'll see us take the torchwood later on. For those types of levels, I would definitely tend towards the Bulba strat of planting your extra sunflowers in the pool.
All right, let's see.
So as we enter 3-7, actually one of the longest levels in the entire run. This is again our next example of a 3-flag level. So in other words, there are 30 total waves, and 3 of which 3 are the huge waves. So you can see the runners will both likely be planting a little bit more sun than usual, because again, that the payoff time for those sunflowers is much longer, because it tends to be about a 6 to 7 minute level, depending on RNG and execution and things like that. So definitely a longer time for the sunflowers to pay off. So it does take a little bit of learning to remember what plants to take, because at the beginning of each level you have to select your plants, and if you're kind of not familiar with each of the levels, or you haven't memorized them, you can definitely lose a little bit of time in plant selection, and then also memorizing about how many sunflowers is optimal for each level. But again, it's as much an art form as it is a science, that if a particular level has is going really well in the start, and you're moving along very well, maybe you opt for fewer sunflowers, just because you've already sort of dealt with a lot of the problems from earlier in the level. But again, if you have the opportunity, or if your sun RNG is good, maybe you do have the flexibility to be able to plant to plant a few more sunflowers. So although we sort of have recommended sunflower amounts, it's okay on a longer level like this if it ends up varying by maybe 1 or even 2, plus or minus, just sort of depending on the circumstances of the level as it unfolds.
And hopefully my microphone will not often, so just made some small adjustments there. Going through 3-7 here, and yeah, they're actually run of this Talwyn, and it is, as we've been discussing, a very deep, and there's a lot beneath the surface that is not immediately obvious. It keeps coming out, doesn't it? Maybe I should join on a different device. For some reason, Discord has prompts for me. Hang on 1 second. Let's see.
And as we, kind of go into our first of the huge waves, and again, you'll see once the runners have at least one repeater in every row, sort of like we did in some of the earlier pool levels, it becomes more and more beneficial to really try to deal with to start planting a couple of instants. You'll see, Tango Kelps in the pool, and maybe even squashes in the pool, and things like that to really begin again moving on the 50% rule, and again trying to deal with those high hit point zombies as quickly as possible. So you'll see the Tango Kelp getting used against the Snorkel zombies, the Chompers getting used against the Bucketheads and the Coneheads, and then again, if you're left with a little bit of extra sun at that point, certainly nothing wrong with going ahead and planting a few extra repeaters in order to do more damage, kind of passively, so to speak, to the remaining zombies that are left.
All right, switch to a different device here. Please definitely tell me if it's still acting up. Definitely going to be a little bit worse mic quality either way, but
sounds good. It's not cutting in and out. You're maybe a teeny bit quieter than before, but that might just be that might just be for me.
All right. Yeah, we'll play it by ear.
Chat seems to say things are.
Your mic is better.
Sound real good.
Interesting. Oh, you know what might have happened? I really hope that I might have forgotten to hook up Discord to my other mic on, which is very sad if that happened, but I don't know.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, I've had to. Yeah, I got a new mic maybe a year ago, and found myself in the same situation.
What happened there? Very sad because I didn't have Discord actually on this PC that I use here before. So, all right. Well, with that behind us, we're going to be
on the way through 3-7. Again, the runners back pretty close. Again, I think we saw them, within less than a second at the end of 3-5, that they were within each other. And, just again, sort of you can look at their progress bar in the lower right-hand corner to see sort of exactly where they are. And I think they're within one wave of each other going into this third flag of the pool level, or of 3-7. So again, it's been back and forth. I think we've seen 3 or 4 lead changes so far. Again, these runners very, very close. Both extremely knowledgeable. Very few major mistakes, I would say, from either one of them. Maybe a handful of instances where a particular wave was a little bit of a problem. I'm sort of thinking of Mad Wasp's situation at the end of 3-5, but really not a lot of real problems or real situations that either one of them wouldn't be able to handle. So as a result, we've had a really good race, and
we'll keep going.
Keep it going, for sure.
Well, hopefully we'll be as close as the last race we had here.
Yep, where...
In fact, it probably even is closer at this point. I think they've been pretty much neck and neck the entire time. There hasn't been a single time when they were, significantly apart. So,
if I recall on that one, I think I was... I was ahead for the first few levels. Then I fell over a minute behind. Then I caught up and actually took the lead going into the final level, and then I choked. I choked Dr. Zomboss and missed him and lost by maybe 30 or 40 seconds. So
yeah, that was a little bit unfortunate, but it was still really fun to watch for sure. With 3-8 coming in right now, now is when we get everyone's favorite zombie, the Dolphin Zombie.
Oh boy.
And, when you ask each Plants vs. Zombies player what their least favorite zombie is, you'll probably get the similar range of responses. Sometimes it'll be the Pogo Zombie, sometimes it'll be the Zomboni, but I think most speedrunners will agree that the Dolphin Zombie, if it isn't the most annoying, at least kind of ranks up there. And because it's basically like a super pole vaulter, moves even faster, has more health, or maybe about the same, and it's in the pool. So it has about the same as a vaulter, so it takes about 17 hits, if I recall, to kill it, but it's at least twice as fast as the vaulter, and it only appears in the pool, and usually the pool is just inherently more difficult to deal with because you have the lily pads that you need and all that other stuff. So sort of if you're unprepared for the for the Dolphin Zombie, it can really set you back by quite a bit. So that's why you'll see our runners both
really making use of the Tangle Kelp and really trying to get that pool as prepared as they can. Luckily, the game doesn't give you any dolphins in the first half, but it does in the second half. Not to mention, it sort of has this like piercing noise to it, like the dolphin.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't sound like a friendly. It's definitely not a friendly dolphin.
No,
This is not
apparently
your
the dolphin-
SeaWorld type of dolphin. This thing's nasty and really can. If there's going to be problems in this level or the next one, it almost always sort of either starts or ends with one of those pesky dolphin zombies. That's for sure.
Yeah, according to the Almanac, the dolphin is also a zombie, so that would explain part of the odd, almost unnatural sound of the shriek.
Exactly. Yeah. It's probably the dolphin's equivalent of saying brains or something like that. I mean, it is not good. Yeah. Don't take your children to see this thing because it's pretty mean. But again, both runners seem to have a couple extra Tangle Kelps in the pool in order to be able to deal with that. The other thing is very much like the pole vaulter. If you plant a lily pad in early on in the pool, the dolphin will jump over the lily pad and then slow down to normal speed from thereafter. So again, yeah, you can see the runners. The best solution is probably the Tangle Kelp. You immediately take care of the dolphin zombie, but sort of the next best thing would probably be using hopefully we'll see it coming up here, using a lily pad and then a squash or some other form of strong firepower right behind it to clean up the dolphins.
Yep. And 3.8 is actually the last level where we use this exact layout. We're going to be using a slightly different setup on 3.9 because we're going to actually take the Torchwood because of just the massive increase that it really has with damage per second. But we actually forgo the Cherry Bomb for that, so the final wave might be a little bit more annoying than it is for some of the other pool levels.
Well, yeah, it can be very hard to make sure that you I think a little misplant there by Wasp with that. Maybe not. Just foresight. That's all. Anyway, it sort of also brings us into you'll maybe try to listen to it with any of these huge waves or the final waves. It brings for us audiophiles, it sort of brings in one of the coolest mechanics of the game, and that is the fact that the soundtrack actually changes dynamically based on how many zombies you have on screen. So for Huge Wave, if you listen very, very carefully to the background music, you'll actually hear like this really cool bass part kick in and like a little like counter melody thing going on in the bass and that whole thing. So again, just another, speaking to the brilliance of the sound design of this level, that's certainly one of my favorite examples. Just that the soundtrack, I'll let you sort of listen to it here.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they actually didn't include that in the mobile version, or I believe the DS version, so a lot of people are not accustomed to it. I think that it is on the console version, but I'm not 100% on that.
I'd like to point out that the runners picked up the tall nut within 1 second of each other going into 3.9. Again, we're almost 2 hours into this run, and these runners are 1 second apart from each other.
This is honestly surprising. Like I was really hoping it would be super close, but I was not expecting it to be this close, because runs typically, even if you're a really strong runner, I'd say that you could probably get a run from anything from like 330 to a 335 based on how many mistakes you make. So to see them, this far into the run without, making any huge mistakes and kind of staying neck and neck is really interesting to see.
Yeah, again, it's these two runners I think are right next to each other on the leaderboards, or if not today, they have been for months and months and months now. Really, the better part of the year that I think both of them have been sort of more seriously running the game, maybe even a little more than a year. So again, we really have a race on our hands. Like I'm I'm really excited to see how some of it unfolds. And inevitably, some levels there's going to be some RNG factors, or there's going to be slight execution errors or mistakes. But again, we'll see how it all evens out over the course of the rest of the run. And almost certainly there will be some overlap. The runners will be at least together for parts of 5-10, which itself is is the most RNG dependent level in the run, and it's about 5 minutes
some
long.
runners would argue with that, but I think that the evidence does agree with you. There are basically 3 levels later on, 4-10, 5-5, and 5-10. They're typically considered to be some of the most RNG based and most annoying levels in the entire run. And I did confirm that Mad Wasp and Boba are 4th and 5th in the leaderboard, only 16 seconds away from their PBs.
Really amazing. So, again, we were sort of hoping, we wanted 2 runners maybe that were, obviously, wanted to participate in this event, and, preferably were relatively close to each other on the leaderboard. But this has really worked out. It's really worked out to a T, I would say. I mean, really a very special, a race so far.
I think the reason why Boba clicks the shovel so much is just out of fun habit sort of thing. If you're bored, you want to click on something that in the mini game Zombaquarium you can tap on the glass by right clicking. It doesn't actually do anything, but it's just something to kind of occupy yourself with during slower moments. So I don't think there's actually any real reason specifically why.
There's no RNG manipulation, at least that I know of, but I think sometimes for certain types, maybe not in these levels specifically, but for certain levels there can be situations where you need to, once you see what zombies are going to appear, you need to immediately dig something up and do something else. So it could just be a habit that he's developed. Again, no real impact, other than just making sure when he does need to make a decision that his mouse cursor is in the right place. Again, as we get into the second flag here, you'll see the runners begin to make use of the Torchwood, which is really a truly a super effective plant. It does cost 175, which is quite a bit, but it doubles the amount of damage of all regular Ps that are going through it.
Yeah,
and
it also has some splash damage as well, which is
splash
really
damage. It does. I believe it's 40% splash damage to any zombies that are within the same square. It's a very small radius, but it's about a 1 square radius to any other zombie that's there. But again, that 40% is of the double damage. So in other words, you're still basically, if you have so that's why you can see the runners for the most part prioritizing Torchwoods over additional repeaters, except when maybe cooldowns or other reasons sort of allow for that you really do potentially more than, at least double your damage, if not more than double your damage by taking on that splash damage as well as the extra damage that it does. Plus, I mean, it just looks cool. I mean, let's be honest here. This is one example of where something that actually looks cool at a casual playthrough truly does save you a good amount of time. So we do take the Torchwood in 3.9 instead of the Cherry Bomb. So as a result, some of these huge waves are a little bit more difficult than normal because you don't have that nice cherry to kind of clean up all the trouble. But it really is. It speeds along these waves just so much, and really helps you just shred through the zombies in a matter of seconds. So
and I believe there used to
take the Torchwood.
I believe there used to be a different strat here as well. If you'd like to comment on that, since you were a little bit more a founder of many of these strats.
Yeah, so again, as we mentioned earlier in the commentary, the strategies for 49 out of the 50 levels have changed in the last 2 years, and this is one that I would say has changed maybe more often than some of the others. So we started off by a long time ago by taking the spikeweed, which we thought at that time was really the only effective solution against the Zombonis, which will be coming up here very likely in this third flag. But that then slowly morphed into into taking the Torchwood, just given the amount of damage that it did. Once we realized that the Chomper and the Squash could be used, and even the Cherry Bomb. We might get it. We're only going to get the Squash, but once we realized that, the Torchwood sort of became the obvious choice. But then we added on to that by getting rid of the cherry and taking the Tangle Kelp instead, which you might say, well, the Tangle Kelp only does a little bit of damage, but the Tangle Kelps help so much with the 50% rule and with the dolphin zombies and with the those early waves, that it ends up being more beneficial to take the Tangle Kelp than it is to take the cherry bomb. Even though you lose a little bit of time on this on the final wave, as you see, Wasp kind of clean up the final wave as Bulba.
I think Bulba might get roof cleaners because I have seen a lot of diamonds on his side.
The boy's rich. There's no question about it.
Moving into 310 is a great level. It says very few runners because 310, even though probably one of the most visually appealing levels out there because just of the absolute huge number of three-peaters you get, and then you get to boost all those P's with Torchwoods. But it is not fun to play because you get probably not enough three-peaters and Torchwoods as you'd like on most attempts at this level. So
Look no further than Wasp's screen. He's gotten a total of 10 plants so far, I believe. Oh, and finally got before he got his first three-peater. So again, it just, RNG giveth and RNG taketh away for sure. It's not, and so that's why you saw him using a handful of the instants because it's a speed run. You can't wait for all of the three-peaters to work out just perfectly. You need to keep the waves moving along, and really the best way to do that is with some of the instants as he did.
Has been relatively lucky with Torchwoods though. Sometimes you will get a ton of three-peaters and then just like one Torchwood, and that is also very bad. There are some levels that are just dependent on the number of one or two plants that you get in from the conveyor belt, and this is one of them.
I always sort of wonder to myself, like if I were tasking this level and I knew how to manipulate the R, and say you could manipulate the RNG perfectly, which I actually don't think you can, not perfectly anyway, but I sort of ask myself, what would what order would I try to give for this level? Because really you do need that perfect combination of three-peaters, Torchwoods, a couple lily pads, maybe 2 walnuts, a couple of instants, and the chances then of getting all of those plants exactly when you want them at exactly the right time, unfortunately is just extremely small. It's just never going to happen. So it really is a very, again, you can see despite Bulba entering that level a little bit slower than Wasp did, they started this huge wave, again, within frames of each other. It's really incredibly close. Again, all because, Mad Wasp's RNG with some of those early three-peaters were not good. However, they've both gotten relatively good luck with the Torchwoods. We like to average about 3 Torchwoods per wave. That's sort of ideal, but again, you don't always quite get, that. They're both short.
Seeing a lot of jalapenos.
Just a couple. Wasp has gotten a couple jalapenos and made pretty good use of those, I would say. So, again, it's really. Just another example of, even though this is an auto scroller and you might think that there's, no skill, there's still decisions to be made. Where do I plant the Torchwoods? When do I use my instants? How do I sort of, balance the firepower in all the different rows to make sure that no row gets, completely overwhelmed or underwhelmed with firepower. I've never taken a death on this level, but I've had some instances where the zombies have just gotten completely out of control. Like I did not get any Torchwoods and any three-peaters, and then I couldn't get the instants when I wanted, and it was just a giant nightmare. So this level, again, is very visually appealing, particularly once you have a setup like Bulba does, and you have all the three-peaters and all the Torchwoods, and everything looks so pretty, and the zombies are just getting, mowed down. But again, it takes a lot to get to that point. It can be very frustrating when things don't work out quite that well. And even a top runner, for example, I lost over a minute to my gold split on this level just the other time that I played through any percent earlier this week. Again, not due to any bad decisions per se or any poor execution, but rather strictly just due to not getting the right plants at the right time.
Yeah, it does look like Bulba is definitely overtaking Wasp at this point. And we knew that something like this was probably going to happen. 310, and there again several more levels where something like this is pretty likely to occur, where there will be one runner who really does get a great hand like Bulba, and one runner who kind of struggles with it. But again, on the whole, it typically does even out. It just makes it a little bit more interesting in the intermediate levels.
But yeah, there tends to be, with Live Split, at least for me anyway, will capture, like the standard deviation of each level. And I think this level is in the top 5 in terms of standard deviations for ending time. Most levels, it's, a common standard deviation might be like 4 or 5 seconds, I would say, for some of the shorter levels, maybe 5 to 10 seconds for some of the longer levels. But any of these, 110, 210, 310, 410, 510, these have standard deviations of like 25 to 30 seconds. So again, if you get, a really bad, you get a bad split, you can see why it's very possible to lose a minute, even if you really didn't make that many mistakes when it comes down to it. So, again, these levels have a pretty high variance, and again, going into 4-1, the fog levels, you can see Bulba actually takes a little bit of a lead there.
Fog level time, probably my least favorite levels, not because necessarily that the concept of a night pool level isn't cool or that the music isn't good, but because the fog itself is a pretty not great mechanic for speedrunning, or in general, I would argue. I kind of would have preferred if they'd done something else, but the fog, since it obstructs our vision, it makes it a little bit harder for us to activate the 50% rule at any given time, because we can't really see where the zombies or the cone heads, which are the greatest threat to us in these fog levels, are going to be. Luckily, we do get the Plantern, but on 4-1, we don't have any method of dealing with the fog, so we do just kind of have to hope that things work out. And if you'd like to explain the audio cues a little bit, that would be
Exactly. So there's slight visual and audio cues. So again, looking at Wasp's screen, if you notice, you can see just in that 7th column only, you can see that you can see a particular puff shroom that's firing, and that tells you what row that the zombie or zombies are in. But even beyond that, there are audio cues that you can listen for. So you can hear there's like a little plip sound, like a very sort of soft plip when you're shooting a regular zombie, but there's a much harder clunk sound when you're when the zombie's hitting a cone head. Trying to listen for it there. I think I can hear that now in the in the 5th row, or it might be the 2nd row for Mad Wasp. I don't know how far behind I am, but again, it's you're able to hear the difference between a cone head and in a regular zombie. So if you start to hear that clunk, you hear the cone head, you know that you probably need to put a little bit more firepower into that row, because it's going to require more than just a puff shroom or two to deal with it.
Yeah, to explain the 50% rule, so because someone asked in chat, so the 50% rule is basically the guiding force of Plants vs. Zombies speedruns. For most normal waves, you just have to deal about 35 to 50% of the damage, or to the total health of any given wave, to spawn the next one early. And on the wave before any huge wave, you have to kill all the zombies. So if we can just focus on getting rid of just about half the health of any given wave, that's what really speeds us up here. And so moving into 4-2, at least for Bulba, Wasp is definitely a little bit behind. Now is when we do start to use the Plantern a little bit, which will help us a lot.
Yeah, and again, kind of further expanding on the 50% rule a little bit. Basically, it looks like it's random when the next wave spawns, but it's actually not. You can spawn the next wave either, like Super explained, by doing 35 to 50% of the current wave's hit points, or by waiting 25 to 31 seconds, which we actually do sometimes in the run. In some of the earlier levels, we saw examples of it where it's more beneficial to wait and to plant Sun. But in these levels where you have the Puffshroom, which is a nice damage-dealing plant that's free, you're almost, it's almost always going to be faster to spawn the next wave by doing 50% of the current wave's hit points. So again, a very, very important mechanic, and that's why you'll see the runners really, really prioritize doing as much damage as they can to the high hit point zombies first. The cone heads, the bucket heads, football zombies, things like that, because it just has such a major impact on how fast the next waves will spawn, and ultimately how fast you can complete the level. And you'll see that the runners do take the Plantern here, and again, that's not because the Plantern in any way speeds up the speed of the level, but because by having that vision, it allows you to make better decisions that in turn, speed along the level. So again, the Plantern is not a new plant. We'd be able to beat these levels, no question, without having any vision. But it's truly a matter of, again, the more knowledge that you have, the better decisions you're going to be able to make.
It's very fortunate that it only costs 25 Sun, so it's really not a huge investment. But we actually do forego the Plantern on levels where we take the Blover because of balloon zombies, because it doesn't really make sense to have that redundancy.
See that the runners place the Plantern in very strategic spots where you're not taking up the prime real estate of the level by putting it too far forward where you like to plant the Puffshrooms, but you're still planting in the plant that with just 2 Planterns you get total vision of the entire level, and you're never caught by surprise in any row. And like Super said, the low cost really does make it very, very beneficial. There's really you always want at least one vision producing plant in each of the fog levels for sure.
All right, going through these levels, we do start to see some Jack-in-the-Box zombies showing up. Some of our, again, I did say that the Dolphin zombie was probably one of my least favorite zombies, but honestly, might have to go with the Jack-in-the-Box zombie, because these zombies, it's pretty much entirely random how long it takes for them to explode. But when they do explode, if you don't kill them in time, then they destroy all plants within a 3x3 radius of them. And while most of these plants here are not super terrible if they get destroyed because they're pretty cheap to replace, it's still annoying. Later on in the run, though, when we're going to use some more expensive plants, that's when the Jack-in-the-Box starts to be very scary.
He's been dubbed the jerk-in-the-box zombie because there have been times where he's cost runners, maybe not an entire run, but when he kills 3, 4, even 5 very valuable plants, you can be set back by easily 30 seconds to a minute on a level if he decides to be mean and explode at exactly the wrong time.
Yeah, as we start getting closer to 4-3, what you're going to notice is that we do not actually take the cactus on this level, and while the cactus is kind of the only our only method of dealing with balloon zombies that the game provides us normally, I would say, it's just entirely too expensive and completely unfeasible for us to be able to afford it in time. So what we do instead is we kind of take advantage of an aspect of the 50% rule, which is that the balloon zombie always spawns with one other zombie. And since they have about the same HP, most of the time, if we just kill the other zombie, we can advance the 50% rule, move on to the next wave, and not worry about the balloon zombie, let go of the lawnmower. However, the issue with this is that the balloon zombie actually has 1 more HP than the regular zombie. So in very rare cases, I think about 10% of the time, you can kill the regular zombie and the 50% rule will not be activated. So you're going to have to wait the entire 25-30 seconds or wait for it to go to the lawnmower for the next wave to spawn, which really slows down the level a lot. So let's hope that both runners do not have to worry about that.
Exactly. So, and luckily on this level, there are only two of the balloon zombies, one on wave 6 and then another on the final wave. And so as a result, because the Doom also is a good way of dealing with the balloon zombie, you're never at risk of the balloon zombie, basically dealing damage, twice and, basically getting through your lawnmower and then later on. So again, as Bulba, I don't know, again, if I'm far behind, but as Bulba, gets his balloon zombie, he did get a good value of the 50% rule. So the game considered him, again, was probably in the 35 to 48% of the hit points that were done. He got a good roll, and so as a result, the next wave spawned, and he's able to kind of keep going. Again, we're not too worried now about the balloon zombie because, as we mentioned earlier, when you proc a lawnmower, the game gives you 2 waves off of not having any zombies in a row. So you'll see in the final wave for Bulba that he does not get any zombies at all in that bottom row because he activated the lawnmower there. And again, great use of the Doom on the final waves. It captures all of the zombies in that 5 square by 5 square radius. And yeah, as Mad Wasp. Mad Wasp also got a good value of the 50%.
They're both lucky, which is very good.
Yep, exactly. Yep, which is very nice because again, it does end up making about a 15-second difference on this level if you happen to get that very bad 1 in 10 chance that that the game doesn't award you with the 50% rule. Again, going into 4-4, the game kindly gives you the Blower, which does 2 things. It kills all of the balloon zombies, it blows them off screen, and it blows the fog off screen as well. So again, the runners are able to. As Mad Wasp, I noticed missed.
Wasp made a pretty big mistake there. He missed a couple zombies with the Doom, had to kill him by hand. So I think that Wasp is pretty far behind at this point. But again, a lot can change. So definitely don't count Wasp out of this run at all.
Yep. Maybe 40 seconds behind at this point. So again, far from insurmountable. Again, 410 alone could amount in a 40-second difference for these runners without, and not to mention any mistakes or anything else.
So I'm just going to spoil right now. Bulba gets another diamond. So he's probably going to get roof cleaners right away.
Insert the memes because they're real. Here, I'll throw a couple of squashes into chat just to celebrate. I do need a diamond emote. That's going to be next on my list as soon as I graduate to my next level of.
If you get 15 subs, I think it is, then you can get in the.
Okay, all right. So yeah. Well, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If I get 15 subs.
Very interesting. What a coincidence.
But yeah, nonetheless, we do have again a few memes. The diamond drops are any sort of these big RNG events. Anytime you get a big squash, there's just some fun events that can certainly happen in these things. Again, different RNG things. There's other levels not here, but where we take or where we play as the zombies against the plants. In another category where again you can have the plants that sort of have RNG events that work against you. So again, the game's a lot of fun. Any percent's a bit of a long category, about 3.5 hours for those that were wondering. Maybe likely to be about 3 hours and 33, 34, 35 minutes for these runners. But we have other categories that range as short as a 2-minute individual level for one of the mini games. We have a 2-hour category, which is all mini games. We have about a 15 to 20-minute category that's all puzzles. And then, again, a wide variety of individual levels. So whether you like short runs or long runs or RNG-based levels or, more technical levels, or you like the mini games, or even if you want to take on the adventure that is 100%, which is about an 8-hour category for 100%. A relatively experienced runner. Truly, whatever floats your boat. You like the longest of the long runs or the shortest of the short. There's something for you in PvZ. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely advocate for any percent if you do have the time to start with any percent, because it really does teach you the vast majority of the game's mechanics that you're going to need to know for the other category, except for probably puzzles. Puzzles is kind of a whole different ball game. entirely. But I definitely feel like 80% is probably, of the categories that are reasonable length, because 100% is kind of ridiculous, probably the most adventure of all of them, because you can just have, just one puzzles run that's incredible and everything works out for you. But with any percent, it's pretty rare that that'll happen. So I think I find 80% to be the most interesting at this point.
It's certainly, in addition to sort of being the category that people are, the most familiar with and likely have the most nostalgia for, most likely, again, it really is, it gets to, you get to showcase a lot of the different mechanics, a lot of the different plants. And again, there's really almost no limit to, to your skill level, and to, again, because every run is different, you're really left in a situation where you feel like it's a fresh new game every time. Even though, again, I've put well over 1,000 hours into speedrunning this game alone, not to mention, playing through casually. I played through with my wife. It's great fun, but it really never ges old, because of the fact that it really does feel like a fresh game every time, and any percent, of all the categories, really does offer the most, that for a reasonably length run.
And speaking of the puzzles, we are doing the puzzles right now, sort of. 4-5 is kind of a collection of Vasebreaker, Vasebreaker mini games, I guess. They're not really mini games, but and so 4-5 is one among the shortest levels of the entire game. I think only 1-1 beats it, but it also can be a pretty big deal if you do not succeed at killing all the zombies fast, because if you run out of plants, or if plants despawn, it can get pretty bad. And also, I think I just saw Wasp move into the level just as Bulba moved out of it. So it looks like
there's about a 1 minute difference now between the time of the two runners. So you can see these runners are very experienced in that level of sort of using the firepower, finding that perfect balance of firepower, but also using the instance in the right spot. So again, this is a very high skill cap level as well. It's again very far from a from an auto scroller. It's there's a potentially a pretty large there's a lot of opportunity for improvement or falling behind.
All right, moving into 4-6. This is probably one of the more untapped potential levels, I would say, because we have to deal with the miner zombie, who kind of is a pain for us because there's really no super fast way to consistently deal with him. So what we end up doing is we use the squash in the back, because the split pea is, again, most of the plants that they provide you for are just way too expensive to really be used the way that they're intended to be used. But it definitely slows down 4-6 a little bit to have to use the squash here. And the final wave is also going to be a little bit more tense, as you'll see, because we have to kind of get everything with the doom, and it's going to be a little bit tight timing.
Only a level where the strategy has changed over time. We actually used to take the jalapeno back when we weren't as good at killing some of the earlier zombies as quick, and we had 125 sun right around the time that the digger came on screen. But what we found was you were better off spending that early sun on the scaredy shrooms, waiting for the digger zombie to dig all the way to the back, and then use a squash on him. And again, use your sun for more productive things like the planterns and the scaredies, and then making sure that you had enough sun in the final wave for the doom. And again, this doom is one of the most important ones in the entire run, because if the digger zombie is you have to wait for all the zombies to get on screen, but you don't want the digger zombie to escape all the way to the back of the level. Otherwise, you have to wait for another squash to reappear in order to deal with him. So again, the timing is there's usually only about a 1 second window Again, it's probably the closest and tightest, execution. I won't call it a trick, but strategies within the run. And you can see Bulba pulled it off really to perfection there. He got a not too fast Digger zombie, waited for all the zombies to get on screen, and then used the Doom at that perfect time to get rid of all the zombies just in a single Doom. But that's something, again, even for top runners, that every once in a while, you just won't get that lucky, and you'll just miss it. So.
And moving on to 4-7 here. 4-7 is kind of a problem level because there's a lot of very high health, very annoying to deal with zombies here, but unfortunately for us, we only get to release the Squash. Some take the Chomper, but I think it's about the same because the Chomper's very expensive. But with the Squash's longer recharge, we kind of have to save it for what's going to really be the most important, so we definitely have to forgo some of the really fast wave opportunities. Like, you'll see there might even be a case where you actually kill Squash because it just isn't going to be useful.
There's a this is the first of the fog levels to bring back the high hit point Buckethead zombie. So again, we try to balance, all right, use the Squash against the Bucketheads, but there's also the possibility of Digger zombies appearing, again, then coupled with, the other firepower and things like that you want to get out. So this level is a strategy that has changed several times, and we've even introduced some slightly newer, at least alternative strategies for the level involving the Chomper to deal with some of the problematic zombies. The first flag is pretty consistent with some of the other fog levels, but it's really once you get to the second flag that things are very different. We actually used to take the Star Fruit on this level because the Star Fruit was effective at dealing damage to the zombies in the front, but also in the back if you had a Digger zombie that got all the way to the back. So it was slower, but again, that just sort of shows how some of these strategies have really evolved. And again, we've tested a lot of them over and over and over, and sort of used the results that tend to have the most consistently good times. With consistency sometimes being as important as raw speed, because it can just be very even though, again, technically the Star Fruit could be faster if you got no Bucketheads whatsoever, you still run the risk of again, if you get too many, it's sort of the high risk high reward play of running into if you get too many of a certain type of zombie that's completely outside of your control, you end up losing way more time than you would have saved otherwise.
All right, moving through 4-7. Looks like Bulba, is dealing with one of those pesky mining zombies, and yeah, I think it's possible to get one on the very last wave, and so if you don't have the Squash for that, it's very unfortunate. And that happening in and of itself is very unfortunate because it is slow to deal with either way. I think you can also get a football then as well.
Yeah. There's
so
a lot
definitely
of
having that Squash for the 9th wave is super useful.
Well, yeah, so as a result, we try not only to use the Squash anytime we can to deal with those the Bucketheads and the miners and so forth, but potentially using an early Doom, as you see Mad Wasp did, but also making sure that a Squash is saved for the 19th wave, i.e. the next to last wave, so that if you do get something on that wave, you have an instant solution to be able to deal with it and get the final wave spawned. By the way, Jack-in-the-Box zombies, which can, again, easily blow up a large amount of your firepower if you're not too careful. So, again, 4-7 is nasty. It used to be one of my least favorite levels, sort of before we found a more consistent way of doing it. But it's a real bear. A lot of different kinds of zombies you can get, and again, just based on each level, again, has a certain probability of appearing certain types of zombies. So you can see, for Mad Wasp, he got 3 cone heads. That could have also been one Buckethead and 1 regular zombie, or it could have been like 5 or 6 regular zombies only, or it could have been a Jack in the Box plus a Conehead plus 2 regular zombies. So there's like there's so many different possibilities. It truly is, again, we're talking about jazz versus classical. This is where you really have to improvise and try to do your best to just push through it and keep the waves coming, and just make sure that you're never caught in a position where you can't deal with a particular wave, because it can just be very very time consuming.
Yep. And moving into 2.8 here, so the Pogo Zombie is again one of those zombies I dislike, but I personally don't have any problem with the Pogo Zombie. It's pretty chill. It doesn't have that much health. We can activate it with the 50% rule pretty easily. And it's, I think it's kind of annoying for a lot of people because it can really set some of those nice like row-based, column-based strategies that a lot of casual players will use kind of into disarray because it gets through the first line of defenses a lot. But for us, there are certainly a lot more annoying zombies to deal with.
Again, luckily they don't have nearly as many hit points as something like a Buckethead or some of your much more dangerous zombies. So with I think it's another one with about 17 normal P-shot hit points. That can be, so with just about, maybe 10 hits or so, you can assure that you've gotten the 50% rule and that, the next wave's going to spawn. And even if it does make it all the way back to your lawnmowers, you're still okay. You're still in pretty good shape, for the rest of the level. So again, it is potentially dangerous, particularly because it's so fast and it can jump over, like walnuts. It can jump over, any of your puff shrooms, your planterns, your sun, but it ends up being not too bad to deal with in the end. Very interesting. I just wanted to give a quick talk about zombie hit points and the 50% rule. So it normally takes 10 P shots in order to deal with, in order to kill a regular zombie. However, the way that works is actually a lot more interesting. So it takes, really, each zombie, the way the game has it programmed, has 200, and each regular zombie has 270 hit points, and each normal P does 20 damage to it. And you're like, wait a sec, Warmech, where's the math there? So what happens is, when you do 200 hit points, the zombie loses its head, but it still has 70 remaining hit points. And that's why sometimes you see the corpses absorbing a little bit of damage as well, because that zombie still technically has hit points until it does the grueling animation of like falling down and falling over and its head falls off and that whole thing. So technically the zombie still has hit points even after it looks like it's dead on screen. And so as a result, when you're calculating the 50% rule, you have to consider sort of those hidden hit points of the zombie after it dies before going on. So that's why if you want to satisfy the 50% rule, you actually need to do a maximum of 7 hits to a normal zombie, even though it looks like he would die in 10. So in other words, you can't just do 5 normal shots, because that zombie still has some hidden hit points left over even after its head falls off and it falls apart. And the game does incorporate those hidden hit points into the 50% rule. So again, that's sort of why those are not things that like you would need to know to begin as a speedrunner, but just sort of hidden mechanics as to like, wait, why does it take 7 hits for the second wave to appear, even though it looks like the zombie should be dead after just 10 hits?
Yeah.
Because of those hidden hit points.
So a lot of people I see in chat are hating on the coffee bean, and I am really here to defend the coffee bean. Because someone mentioned that the coffee bean, they liked that the coffee bean wasn't in Plants vs. Zombies 2 and that you could just use mushrooms anywhere. I think that was probably one of the worst decisions that they made in Plants vs. Zombies 2. Because the idea of mushrooms in general, and in this game primarily, is that they're very, very good. Very good value. And kind of being able to use mushrooms as they are day level in this game would be kind of ridiculous because of like having firepower for free is just pretty insane, to be honest. And like the Doom, for example, is just strictly better than a Cherry Bomb, not factoring in the Coffee Bean. So using that Coffee Bean allows you to still use the nighttime plants during the day, but it makes them, a little bit, less ridiculously overpowered. And we actually will use it at some point in the speed run. Not going to spoil exactly what, but we also do use it for the Doom. And so in the second game, because puff shrooms are just kind of ridiculous, if I remember correctly. I haven't played the most recent version of the second game in a long time, but I think that they really had something cool going there with bringing the mushrooms back, but they just had really kind of a balancing nightmare because they didn't have any kind of way to overcome making them usable in the Dark Ages, but making them also usable in the normal areas. So yeah,
definitely. If you're hating on the Coffee Bean, stick around about another 40 minutes or so, I would say, because you might have some second thoughts. You might be changing your position a little bit. The Coffee Bean is not the worst plant in the game. It's
one of the best, I would argue, actually.
Yeah.
And we also on 4.9 do see probably my personal favorite plant in the game, and I would also argue one of the most useful be the Magnet Shroom. The Magnet Shroom is super useful for the 50% rule because remember all those bucket heads and all those annoying Jack-in-the-Box zombies, football zombies, all of them, and how high hit points they have. The Magnet Shroom would just take off their helmets and pretty much instantly activate the 50% rule every time. So very useful.
Using the simple math of it, a Buckethead normally takes 60 hits to kill. Taking off that magnet immediately removes 50 out of the 60 hit points, and that almost always is enough to instantly satisfy the 50% rule and spawn the next wave coming along. So the Magnet Shroom is really, really good from a speed, even in a casual playthrough perspective. I mean, the Pogo zombies and the Bucketheads and things like that can be a real problem, but the Magnet Shroom is really, really, really strong, from a speedrunning perspective.
Speaking of the Magnet Shroom,
oh boy,
look what level we're on.
Everybody's
Probably
favorite.
The worst level in the game, 410. So you can't see, and that's actually probably the least of our problems here. The Magnet Shroom on 410 is probably the most important single plant on any level that we play in this game. In any percent at least, and not factoring like the super early ones where we only get one. Because the Magnet Shroom takes so much health off of those Bucketheads and off of those high health zombies. If you don't get a Magnet Shroom in this level, because they're kind of rare, you are set behind so much, it is ridiculous. And so, so far, I see Bulba just got one, which is very lucky for him. But we will see how the rest of that plays out.
Again, it being able to get rid of those, the other advantage too, not only is it doing a lot of damage, towards the 50% rule and spawning the future waves, but it also helps protect your plants, because again, those Bucketheads can be impossible to kill. Then they can start walking through. They can eat your Starfruit. They can eat your other offensive plants, which slows you down even further. So again, really the importance of the magnet can't be understated. And I'm very happy that both of our runners got at least one magnet early on, because this level can just be an absolute disaster if you don't get at least one. Yeah, in the first flag. Yep. And preferably at least two by the time you get to the second flag, which is Bulba actually got a third. That's really good for him. But Wasp has got at least one, and that sort of again is truly the minimum that you need to at least have.
Some good magnet counts here. For sure.
Yeah. Wasp got a second, Bulba got a fourth. Yeah, so we're definitely, they're definitely in pretty good shape as it relates to magnets. Now we'll see, how the firepower works out and what types of zombies they get and where, but they'll be they've at least gotten that minimum. Yeah, again, you can see Wasp there. It was hard to see. You just saw a flash of it on the screen for the second, but it saved him a huge amount of time in dealing with that.
Wow, Bulba gets a fifth magnet. That is kind of ridiculous. At a
Yep.
certain point,
Both runners
you don't
are-
really want power. I'd say 4 is probably the sweet spot. I've seen you get up to like 7 or 8 or 9 even. I don't remember the exact number.
Yeah, I definitely remember getting at least 7 on a run, and I might have had eaten one in there too. But there is sort of that problem of, if you get too many magnets and not enough firepower, potentially it could reach the point where it does slow you down a little bit too in the grand scheme of things. But both of these runners, particularly Bulba, I would say have a pretty good blend of firepower to magnets based on where they are in
Yes.
this level for sure.
By
the way, there are balloon zombies. So
balloon zombies. Those can be cool.
Counter those with the cactus or with the blover.
I have seen cases where I've barely gotten a cactus out in time for a specific row that had a balloon zombie in it.
When I was less experienced, I took a death in this level because I got 5 cacti and. And then I let one of the balloon zombies go through. I didn't really have a choice, and then another one got through, and it was like the most anxiety producing moment of pretty much any speed run ever. That watching that balloon zombie go, and I have no protection with the lawnmower in the back, and just literally over the course of about 30 seconds or however long it took, just watching me slowly get to my death. And as each plant spawned, I got no blowers, no cacti, and I just had to watch myself cook, by the very end of it. So a very, very sad situation. So now we're a little bit more. I've learned to be a little bit more conservative about my cacti placement, as well as making sure I always save at least one blower for that true worst case scenario if I don't have enough cactus plants.
There have been times I've done no blowers on this level either. I think the blower might be as rare as.
The blower, I think, has the lowest probability, maybe along with the magnet. We don't have the data, the exact data on this level, because the Flash game that we extracted the source code from to learn as much as we did about this game only went through 2.5, so we were only able to get the specific mechanics of the game up through 2.5.
Yeah.
I'd say Mad Lofty was over a minute behind at one point, but it looks like there's a chance that he could maybe make up a little bit of that time, due to a pretty solid 410. Although Bulba's 410 was good as well. But again, we have some very high, some high room. There's a lot that can go wrong in the roof levels. They're probably technically the most challenging levels in the game, as you would sort of expect, for something this late in the run. And again, definitely left in a position where either runner could easily gain or lose 10 or 15 seconds on any given level, and certainly close to a minute on any of the more RNG heavy levels.
The roof. It is very risky, especially if you don't have the roof cleaners, which Wasp is looking like he will not be able to get the roof cleaners. But especially 5-1 is a very strange level because you don't have the flower pot. So this really sets us back substantially, because most of our instants that we usually like to use to speed up the levels just don't have the range. So we actually bring the jalapeno on this level so we can kind of reach out on that final wave and get rid of some cone heads further in the back. But 5-1 I think is probably the slowest level relative to the number of flags that you have on it. So it's probably the slowest of the main 1 flag level. Because of that.
I'd certainly agree. Maybe 1-4, depending on.
Well, I'd say probably the average of each, or maybe even like the best possible of each that we've got.
Exactly.
And you'll see Bulba squash that Bungee zombie, not only because if he lost the flower pot that'd be kind of annoying, but also because the Bungee zombie does contribute to the 50% rule, and so by squashing it you can kind of speed up that slow animation that it does.
Exactly, yep. And the reason that we're not planting normal peas here is that in the first, second, third, and fourth columns, going from left to right, you'll notice that the roof sort of slants down a little bit. So for those a little less familiar with the game, what that means is that if you have a pea shooter in rows 1, 2, 3, and 4, your pea shots will hit the roof and will not hit the zombies that are coming on. But again, starting in column 5, as you can see from Bulba's screen, you can begin to plant, repeaters or really any kind of pea shooter there, and they'll hit the zombies coming in the back. So we definitely take advantage of that. And then again, the rest of the roof is flat. So again, we are able to, eventually, move along with the level, but it can be very challenging in this early level in particular, just given that you can't sort of utilize some of the strategies we've used so far to make some of the early waves move along more quickly.
Yeah, according to YMB, which is actually new information for me, contrary to what I've heard, the Bungie zombie doesn't count to the 50% rule. So I think that, which is interesting because I have not really had that experience, but at the very least, it is still valuable in that you don't have to get rid of the flower pot.
Exactly. Yeah. It sort of seemed that it might be more anecdotal than fact-based, but
that's true.
Once you get rid of the Bungie zombie, it does seem like the next wave appears more quickly. Maybe it's just that the Bungie doesn't count towards 50% specifically in that one, but maybe it helps to get the zombies going more quickly. But maybe that's more just observation or what it's felt like, as opposed to anything that's rooted in fact. But nonetheless, it's still very important not to lose a pot or not to lose one of your more valuable plants. So if you can spend 25 or 50 sun to deal with the Bungie, then again you're setting yourself up for a much better situation overall.
Bulb is using an interesting strat here where he's actually going ahead and planting all of the flower pots right away. And I'm not really sure if that's the norm, but it seems like it would be useful for getting out your repeaters, although might interfere slightly with sun production. I don't actually know.
I personally have I've sort of started to gravitate a little bit more towards putting the potato mines a little bit farther forward as Bulba's done. You're kind of going to need to plant the pots anyway, so as long as it doesn't slow down your sunflower production, and as long as you're sort of not left in a situation where you have you're not able to afford a repeater or something that you really need, I think it can be pretty valuable. But again, that's sort of, this game can sort of be a little bit as much about preference as it can be anything else. It's not necessarily that one is right or wrong. It's just, on average, over the course of dozens or hundreds of runs, there'll be some strategies that'll be statistically a little bit more likely to result in a faster pace. So I think that's maybe what you're playing. If you so kind of for some people, getting the sunflower pots out just is a little bit more comfortable. And again, whether or not it's actually faster is a little bit up for debate. But again, that's one of the things that sort of makes things so nice, is that you can have slightly different stylistic choices without necessarily having a detrimental effect on your final time.
Yeah, and it looks like Wasp is gaining a little bit of ground slowly and over time. I still think there's a significant gap, but it does look like, at very least, maybe not a full minute behind now. I don't know for sure though.
I would guess about the same thing. Yeah, I would say that Wasp is sort of getting close to a minute and a half behind at one point, but again, is now starting to inch back just a little bit. He had a pretty clean final wave for 5-1 versus Bulba had a few more hiccups, a little bit of zombies sort of not showing up in the ideal places. But Bulba has a pretty clean layout here for the beginning of the second flag, so we'll sort of see how it all works out for both runners.
We shall. And we do see those roof cleaners from Bulba. They're a great sight to see.
The memes are real. The memes are definitely real. Again, when one of us gets enough subscribers, perhaps the roof cleaners could become an emote too. So
I don't know. You might have to get your brother to buy you like an angry roof cleaner or surprised roof cleaner, something like that. Because I don't know if they work super well on it.
Exactly. Yeah. We need it'd be a little bit
taco sub badges. Those are really nice.
A little bit hard to tell again. Yeah, my brother being the Photoshop wizard of the household, and I don't know what skills I have, but well, I guess PVZ speed
at least one.
So that's great. But Yeah, again, yeah, Bulba really moving along very well in the second half. He's done a great job of, finding that delicate balance between, getting Torchwoods out, getting some more repeaters, using the Chompers at the right time. Again, it was certainly looking like Mad Wasp is gaining, and it still remains to be determined. Moving into the second flag for him, but again, a lot of again, a lot of excitement. These runners are very, very familiar with the roof levels and sort of all of the tricks and nuances and little bits of aggravation that it can play. Again, you can see actually Wasp pulling out the potato mines and using the potato mine and actually getting a real value instance against a Buckethead. So again, just goes to show that again, really the most that utilizing all of your plants as best as you possibly can is just really, really important. For getting a good time in these levels. Like just because we use the potato a lot in the beginning, it doesn't mean that we should necessarily always ignore it in the second half. You don't want to waste it, but really, again, you always want your most important plants to stay off cooldown as much as possible.
And as you can see, they're kind of starting to take away those flower pots from us. It's very unfortunate. But the number of flower pots the game gives you for free goes down from 5 columns, 5-1, all the way down to 3 and 5-3, and then for the rest of roof. So definitely makes things a little bit more challenging to afford sometimes, but 5-3 is a very similar level to 5-2 and how it's played besides that. So part of the reason why we don't use the Kernel Pult, which is unlocked on this level, is because it just doesn't have a very high damage per second. It kind of has a similar problem to Snow Pea, but it's also very RNG based, because I think there's a 1 in 4 chance that you get Butter, which stalls the zombies at any given shot. However, the challenge is that on all puzzles runs, where some levels do have some of the iZombie levels do have the Kernel Pult in them, we always seem to get the Butter at the worst possible times. It really slows us down.
It's true. You never get Butter when you want it, when you're using it, in a regular run, but you always get it, when you least want it. So
it is not consistently every 4 shots, actually.
Again, it's the game sometimes does seem to have it out against us. I mean, you guys may not believe it, but I swear sometimes the game does something does a bunch of really nasty things like that to you in a row, and then it'll throw you one bone. Like it'll give you just enough of like a teaser, like, oh, I'm sorry, I was a little bit too mean to you. Yeah. Here you go. Here's something nice for you. So again, I think the game again may not be malicious necessarily, but it definitely it definitely it enjoys the ability to mess with runners by quite a bit.
Oh, yes. All right. So definitely still seeing Bulba with a pretty sizable lead, although upcoming as as A1 Major, a very top level runner this game always likes to complain about, would be the level 5-5. And so I didn't actually remember it being a very memorable level when I played through casually, but speedrunning, it's pretty hard to forget. So I'm not going to exactly spoil what the level's about just yet, but definitely be on the lookout for 5-5. And if one thing can really change the tides on how this race is going, I think that level may have a significant say in it. So
5-5 I kind of describe as the level that has one of the highest RNG factors in the game, but also the highest skill cap in the game. So it requires tremendous skill, but also has a very high RNG component. So it's it is very, very difficult to to manage for both of those reasons, because it's very difficult to develop a consistent strategy to it. Versus, you'll notice like 2-2 or 5-2 and 5-3, these last two levels have been a little bit similar in their layout. You see the runners, setting up pea shooters in column 5 and torchwoods in column 7, and although there are some zombies that are a little bit different, and a few, you do have the option of the butter bolt, although we don't take it. The playthrough of these two levels are really two of the more similar ones, but things really start to change, and 5-4 is extremely different from 5-5, very different from 5-6, and then we have some very special zombies that get introduced to us in 5-8 and 5-9. So definitely stay tuned for that, because there are many surprises left to come in this run. We don't just put torchwoods and repeaters for the rest of the game. We'll put it that way.
A game not meant to be speedran. Interesting that you should say that, because I would argue that the nature of Plants vs. Zombies means that you can play it in pretty much every way that you want. So, and there are a lot of factors that cause us to be able to play much faster than the average player can.
And I think everyone's a little biased towards their community, but
yeah. I think we should probably re-explain the 50% rule as well, because that is many people don't know about it, and it allows. Because again, as someone said, speedrun of auto-scrollers, not an auto-scroller even in the slightest.
It may look like it, but because the game is programmed in such a way that the faster you kill wave X, the faster wave X plus 1 will appear. That simple mechanic alone turns it from what would have been the most boring, long, just snooze fest of a speedrun into arguably, again, my, completely unbiased opinion, the most brilliant speed game in existence. Like, truly that one factor makes such a difference, because, again, what the 50% rule is, for those that are joining a little bit later, is the mechanic that if you do 50% of wave X's hit points, then it's actually between 35 and 50% of the current wave's hit points, then the next wave will spawn. So in other words, the faster that you kill any particular wave, the faster the next wave will appear. But the game, of course, isn't as simple as just, killing all the waves as fast as you possibly can, because it can reach a point where if you sacrifice too much and kill the early waves, too quickly, like you just do 50%, then eventually you can become overrun by zombies, or you could not have the sun economy, or you could not have the repeaters out that you need to do enough damage to the subsequent waves. So there's a constant sacrifice between how much do I sacrifice to make this wave go faster versus how much do I invest in my sun, in my economy, versus how much do I invest in something like a pea shooter that may not speed along the current wave that much, but may help me overall in the long run do 50% damage to more total waves than before. So as a result of this 50% rule, again, this game, I cannot tell you, like just for some perspective, again, I was one of those kids, I did very well in school, I did, I loved math, I love puzzles, I work in a fairly analytical field, but and I've run this game for 1,000 hours, but I still feel like in some ways I don't totally understand the game, or don't always make the right decisions, or my brain simply can't handle the literally hundreds of variables every level that can affect what is the right decision and what is the wrong decision. It's not an auto scroller, it's a decision making speed run that basically is somewhere between running Tetris, where you don't know exactly what pieces you're going to get, but you sort of have to react based on that. It's a speed run for people that love puzzles, love analytical thinking, love learning to optimize problems or optimize certain systems and things like that. But it's a system that's so complicated and so difficult to empirically analyze that there really are almost an infinite number of solutions that you can come up with that all ultimately affect the speed of a particular level. So it is not a game that shouldn't be speed ran. It is a unique gem among speed runs that truly is unlike any other speed game that I've run into ever. And again, I've been speedrunning. I joined Speed Demos Archive way back in 2003. So again, that should give you like some perspective of sort of how many speed runs I've watched over the years, and the number of hours of my life that I've committed to this hobby that I love so passionately. But again, so when I say that this is a one of a kind speed game, it's not because I've only speed run or played 2 or 3 different games and I just happen to like this one the best. I actually wouldn't even say that Plants vs. Zombies necessarily is my favorite video game of all time, but it is my favorite speed run of all time by far, just because of the true like beautiful nature of like the fact that you need to think on your feet. You couldn't possibly plan for every combination of zombies that could appear in every row, because every game is different. The first time you might get one zombie for the first wave in row 1, then the next one in row 4, and then the next time you play through you might get 2 zombies in a row in wave 2, which is a low probability occurrence, but you still need to be able to react to it. So you're always learning new things. You're always sort of learning new problematic things that you can run into throughout the course of the run. So again, as a result, in my opinion, it's what makes it special among speed games, is that like truly every time is different, every speed run is different. And although we have overall strategies that generally produce the fastest time and generally come out with the most optimum income, it's truly an impossible game to truly optimize for every single scenario that you could run into.
Absolutely. Very, very well put. And on the note of playing fast, I think some of you may have noticed, if you're looking carefully at the seed selection screen, Bulba actually bought the Gloom Shroom. And so you might be like, why would he buy the Gloom Shroom? I mean, it's the roof levels. You can't really use the Gloom Shroom on the roof, because how would you set that up? Where it's really expensive because of the coffee bean, but the Gloom Shroom strat is extremely useful for all of the levels upcoming, and it has really sped up the speed game, and it's a very interesting strat to be able to watch. So I definitely recommend staying tuned for 5.6 through 5.9. It's also very, very risky and very high risk, high reward, I would say, because we don't have enough space to take a lot of the more traditional plants. So you will see there may be some major mistakes that happen as a result of this. I mean, Jack in the Box zombies can cost us our entire Gloom setup, and so it'll be interesting to see how these will handle it for sure. But for now, we're just using the coffee bean for the Magnet Shroom and the Doom Shroom, which is still a very useful use of it. And I think we actually did used to take the Gloom on this level as well, but it was determined that the higher DPS brought by this strat in the end, even though it's a lot more expensive for Reapers and Torchwoods, does end up being a little bit faster on 5.4.
Given that this was a 3 flag level, and given the fact that there's so many magnetic zombies, we actually found that the magnet was faster than the Gloom, and so in order to take the magnet, you had to sacrifice one of the 2 pieces of the Gloom Shroom, and so that wasn't worth it. So that was when sort of the whole strategy, more or less got reinvented. So again, if you go back to some 2-year-old world records that we had, a lot of these levels, from a layout perspective and from a strategy perspective will look pretty different from what you're seeing right here with these runners. But again, those that were hating the coffee bean earlier in chat, I know where you are, and I don't know where you live, but I can pretend that I know where you live. Then you'll see now, you'll see the error of your ways, that never in your life have you been so more mistaken than by hating on our friend the coffee bean.
5 time. So you get 4 plants: cherry bombs, chompers, pumpkins, and flower pots. And never before has there been a level with so few plants that is as complicated and as kind of ridiculous as this level. This level can go, no 2 playing of this level goes even remotely the same as another one. Because the 50% rule very much still applies, so you definitely want to get rid of those bucket heads as fast as possible. But at the same time, since each zombie dies as fast, you kind of have to keep that in mind as well. So it's just, I will be very interested to see how this level goes for both.
This is a perfect example of sort of what I was talking about in my long, I won't call it a rant, but in my long explanation of the game that, again, you could, if you wanted to, spend every cherry bomb right away and every chomper right away and so forth. And, basically, well, almost literally blow through the first few flags of the level as fast as you possibly could. But instead, you have to make that decision. Do I save a cherry bomb for later? Do I use a cherry bomb here to deal with all these zombies? Do I sacrifice a flower pot or a pumpkin and let a zombie eat through it? Do I try to, move along the 50% rule and then try to clump up all of my cherry, make my cherry bomb as effective as possible? So this is another perfect example of where, again, you really have to find that ultra delicate balance of, obviously trying to kill each wave or 50% of each wave as fast as possible, but also keep in mind that, number one, going too fast can result in your plants getting eaten, or, if later on in the level you don't get as many cherries or you don't get as many chompers, you can really set yourself up for some real problems. So as a result, this level, again, is, in my opinion, one of the highest skill cap levels in the entire run, as Super mentioned, because every playthrough is so different. Like you'll see that the Bungie zombies are bringing down the zombies that appear on the screen, and as a result, and they place them basically in completely random places. They can be placed, I think, anywhere between row 4 and row 9, and they can place 3 in the same row, or 3 in this row, 2 in this row, or 1 in each of the 5 rows, or anything like that. So the zombie placement can be all over the place, and just because you have a setup in one area doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work for all the areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw someone in chat ask if we're doing mini games. We do not do mini games anymore, but we do play them in the aptly named category mini game. Which, if you thought that this category had a lot of RNG, then you would be severely mistaken, because all mini games is probably one of the most RNG-based categories I've ever seen in my life. Because you play a level literally called Slot Machine as the first level, because it kind of gets a little bit ridiculous. You also do them in 100% as well, but they make up a smaller proportion of it.
Exactly. Yep. So again, there are many categories, and I highly encourage you to check out really any of the runs on speedrun.com. We have, again, the mini games category, we have the puzzles category, we have any percent, we have 100%, we have all of the individual levels for the mini games, as well as the survivals levels. So really, anything that you, any kind of level that that you like could be one that, whatever types of speed runs you like, more luck-based runs, you like, more technical runs, you like, there's even one called Begooled and Begooled Twist that are sort of based on the Bejeweled series. So again, those levels sort of require skills that are completely outside of the normal Plants vs. Zombies skill set. So again, some of the brilliance of the other categories is that, again, there's a lot of luck that goes to them, but there's also a huge amount of sort of variance in the types of video game skills that you need in order to excel at those particular those particular categories. Five, I would say, was not
like
devastating for either.
Not getting super great RNG on this level.
Yeah. He had an excellent first half, but then the cherry production really seemed to slow down quite a bit for the second half. So, what was looking like he was going to maybe gain back about 30 seconds, sort of as a result of kind of running out of some firepower. He may end up actually taking a little bit of a hit on this level in terms of his time.
Yep. Very unfortunate, but that's just how 5.5 works.
Yep.
Make no mistake, though, there is still plenty of time on the next few levels for a major technical error to happen. And also 5.10 can, the number of cycles that you get on Zomboss is a huge limiting factor as well.
So you see Bulba already on 5.6, beginning to take advantage of, again, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant strategies that was developed by any of our runners, and that's the Gloom Shroom strat. And again, Gloom Shroom, highly, highly underrated in casual playthrough. The idea is basically that...
Lost was not happy about this at all. that was very sad.
Yeah.
Very sad 5-5.
Very, very sad end to 5-5 in what was looking like a pretty good first half for him overall. So again, the Gloom.
He also apparently was not able to afford the Gloom. It does not look like it. So he will have to improvise a little bit.
Oh man, I'd probably go Torchwood strat.
Either that, or he just doesn't remember that he doesn't have the Gloom. It looks like he's kind of struggling to figure out what exactly is going on here.
Yep. Again,
yeah,
it's
he
probably
doesn't have
only
enough.
5%.
He doesn't have enough. So he's doing Torchwoods and repeaters.
Wow. Yeah, it's probably only 5% of runs that you can't afford the Gloom. So this, unfortunately, is a major
even
blow.
with the diamond. I just think he got really bad drops. And
he's only $110 away, and this is in a category where you get over $10,000 over the course of the run. He's less than 1% away from what he needed to be able to afford
I
the
said
Gloom.
that the 100 sun
Devastating.
the 100 coins might make a difference in 3-5 all the way back, and it almost did.
Yep. And, really it just maybe if he picked up one more silver coin and two more, saved two more lawnmowers.
It might have been smarter if he had not bought the rake.
Again, you can also, sometimes you choose not to buy the rake if you think you're cutting it a little bit close. Now, normally when you get a diamond,
he also has the rake right now as well for some
100%. Assures that you get enough money. But unfortunately, Wasp, again, because of bad RNG in 5-5 and 5-10, had to use more lawnmowers than he normally does. And the lawnmowers at the end of each level, for those less familiar with it,
3-5
are.
and 3-10. Do you mean?
Sorry,
okay.
3-5 and 3-10. Apologies. Every lawnmower that you save at the end gives you an additional $50. So again, you can see just with a couple extra coin drops or a couple of saved lawnmowers, Wasp would have been able to afford. The Gloom for this level, but unfortunately he couldn't. He is getting semi-decent RNG, that repeater really doing work at the beginning of the level. And again, you maybe only lose about 15 to 20 seconds on these levels without the Gloom strat. But again, you can see the Gloom, the reason that we use the Gloom strat overall is that it does 4 damage per tick in a 3x3 area. So as a result, the DPS done by the Gloom, even though it's very expensive to get it up and running, by placing it very far forward, right when the zombies first start to get on screen, they're already being dealt 4 damage per second. They're already being dealt a huge amount of damage compared to even the Repeater and Torchwood strategies. So again, as a result, definitely very, very valuable to do the Gloom strat, as Bulba fortunately gets a little bit unlucky with the Doom at the very end. But again, we do use the repeaters as a backup strat here. Probably only happens in 5% of runs that you don't have enough money by 5-6. But unfortunately, Mad Wasp, again, getting trolled by some of the RNG a little bit earlier in the level, and just set in a position where unfortunately he's
I wonder if he'll be able to afford it next level.
I'm certainly hoping so. Again, being so close that just with a couple of coin drops and things like that, you should be able to earn about $100 per level. I'm going to try to keep an eye on his coin count here just to see. But
Yep. And Bulba is moving into 5-7. 5-7 is kind of I'd probably say the most traditional of all of the 4 Gloom strat setups. Probably the most basic, because for some of the other ones you kind of have to change your strats around a little bit. But 3-7 is just a very long level, and it doesn't have a whole lot of weird. Well, it has a lot of weird.
5-7 actually reintroduces the Bungie zombie, which you might remember from 3-1 and 5-1 and 5-5. So what the Bungies do is they steal a plant off your screen. And so, as you might imagine, we have these very, very expensive Gloom shrooms that cost several hundred sun to get fully up and running. You have to plant the Fume, you have to plant the Gloom, you have to plant the the coffee bean to wake it up.
Bulba getting bad stun RNG, kind of missed that zombie there.
Yeah, and he had a very
Sad.
fast third zombie as well. So again, another example of where the zombie speed can certainly come into play, throughout the course of Bulba forgetting to disable his Twitch alerts.
no.
He learned that from his buddy Warmech, who just never remembers ever. And your Steam alerts. But yeah, again, if the Bungees try to steal your Gloom Shrooms, I mean, it can really set you back incredibly, for these levels. So as a result, what we try to do, another value of taking the squash is not just here in the first couple of flags, but later on, the squash, as we saw earlier, works very, very well against the Bungie zombies, and they can offer you protection against the Bungees by planting an empty sunflower pot right behind your Gloom Shroom, such that if a Bungie jumps down, you have enough time, if you're quick, to plant the squash and save your Gloom Shroom. So really, there's a lot to worry about in this level. You already have 50% rules and sunflower production and Gloom production, because the Gloom itself is on a very, very long cooldown.
Wasp moves into 3-7, and visually not like as far behind as I would have expected him to be at all, considering the circumstances. He affords the Gloom. He's the underdog in this tale, and he hopefully will be able to make some sort of comeback. I would love to see the runners neck and neck for Zomboss. That might be asked for a little bit much at this point, but you never know what can happen in this game.
Exactly. Yeah, we've seen runners, even some more experienced runners, actually take a death in 5.8 and 5.9.
Oh yes,
because of the introduction of a very special zombie that can troll you a lot, and we do usually.
I think it's unlikely he'll take a death though because of the roof cleaners, but it does happen. Even
sure.
then, it still happens.
Yep. And again, yeah, if he loses some glooms, again, all of a sudden, we could be back in a. We could be back in a pretty close race. For some perspective, I had a PB that was a minute and a half behind on 1.5, but things went so well for the remaining 5 levels that I actually caught up towards the very end. So again, there can, even though he's probably about a minute and a half behind now maybe 2 minutes, it's very possible for one runner to gain a minute and a half and one runner to lose a minute and a half, and then all of a sudden again the tides can completely turn again.
Oh yes. So yeah, we're getting through these glooms. Bulba has a nice setup going here with his Doom for some of those intermediate huge waves, and this is looking like how it looks. I think it's pretty unlikely that I do think the Bulba had a pretty slow first half, or not first half, but like first flag, but not like run killing by any means at all.
And those of you that like symmetry, these levels tend to be a little bit more symmetrical, so you can open your eyes again. You can look at the run again. All of the horrors of the lack of symmetry that we saw throughout the pool and fog levels, all of those problems have been resolved, and we did it just for you.
Yep. And someone asked again about the 50% rule. So do you want to give the spiel, perhaps one final time?
One final time, or I mean, I love the 50% rule.
That's true.
It never.
There's no limit.
It really never gets old.
The
it
number
truly
of times we
doesn't.
can explain it.
So the 50% rule is perhaps the most important mechanic in PvZ speedrunning. That is basically that it may appear to a casual runner or a casual gamer that the zombies just appear in somewhat even intervals and kind of, roughly sorts of things, and that you don't have a lot of control over it. In fact, you actually have complete control over it via the 50% rule. And that's a mechanic that's built into the code of the game that basically says that if in order for the next wave to appear, you need to do between 35 and 50% of the total hit points of all the zombies on the current wave. So as a result, if you, again, just simplicity's sake, if you have 2 regular zombies and you kill one of those zombies immediately, and then the next wave will appear. And at that point, that first the one zombie that you didn't kill the first time, that won't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is the current wave and the current wave's hit points. So as a result, we really put an extremely high focus on doing as much damage to each wave as possible in order to trigger the 50% rule. We don't worry too much about killing all the zombies in all the waves, because usually you have enough firepower to sort of, clean up the mess, so to speak. But instead, if you can do anything in your power to do as much possible damage to the high hit point zombies early in each wave, then you move along in the next wave much more quickly. So again, sort of looking at Mad Wasp's screen, as soon as he does 50% of this current wave, he'll then move to the next wave. As soon as he does 50% of that wave, he'll move to the next wave. The other thing that comes in with the 50% rule is if you don't do any damage to the wave, then the next wave will appear in a random number between 25 and 31 seconds later. So you can't just ignore particular waves and sort of build up an infinite number of sun. The game is eventually going to start throwing those zombies back at you, but the faster that you kill wave X, the faster wave X plus 1 will appear, and so forth and so on throughout the entire run. The only exception to that being the final wave, where obviously you have to kill all the zombies, and every wave that's before the huge wave. So wave 9, wave 19, wave 29, because there are 10 waves per flag, you need to kill all of the zombies. So remembering what wave you're on is actually very, very important for the speed run too. Once you get to a high enough level, again, just given that, you sort of have to remember that, there's certain waves that you have to do all of the zombies' hit points versus those waves where you can get away with just doing, a fraction of the zombies' total hit points.
Yep. And some observant viewers have noticed that there is, in fact, a Gargantuar on 5.8, which Bulba is now in the middle of. The Gargantuar is a very scary zombie because he takes 2 instants to kill and also throws an imp when he takes half damage. And so, we have exactly 2 instants to use on this level, Squash and the Doomshroom, and we use both of them, so we can just get rid of that Gargantuar as soon as possible. So what you'll see Bulba doing is you'll see him sooner or later placing a Doom down really early on, like way earlier than we think would be necessary. And we will use that when the Gargantuar spawns. We'll squash it first, and then we'll use a Doom to get rid of both the Imp and the Gargantuar itself, and just completely neutralize that threat.
I remember Gargantuars taking probably a full minute to take down when I was playing through the game casually, but again, as a result of some of these more clever speedrunning strats, we've now brought that down by a substantial margin. Ooh, is Matt Wasp?
Things are not going super well for Wasp. He's losing
a little bit of trouble,
losing some control here, and the Doom will probably.
He thought that he was on the 19th wave, or the 29th wave rather, but instead he was.
This looks pretty bad.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. Hopefully uses a Doom a little bit farther out than we normally use it, just so he catches some of those.
Yeah, I think that's probably the inevitable.
Might even use it, in that 6th column there. Actually, again, as Bulba completely annihilates the Gargantuar, you saw him do basically a quick 1-2 punch by using
Wasp
the squash immediately. Yeah, that was good by Wasp. Great recovery by Wasp. Going to be maybe a little time loss, but not a run killer. Not certainly not taking a death or anything too devastating. And he does have his friend the Gloomshroom now. So. The rake rather. He was able to revive.
Keeps taking that ice shroom by accident, almost.
Yeah, I saw that. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how useful that would be on this level. It is not super uncommon to see runners take the wrong plants in the roof levels. I've seen Warmack do it a couple times because you just get so flustered on the roof levels. It's extremely tense. You need to play so perfectly for so long. So, taking the wrong plant is bad, but if you don't realize that you've taken the wrong then you either basically have 2 options when you do notice. You can either restart the level or just try and finish it with the plants that you've taken. And sometimes, and Bulba gets another diamond.
Another diamond. That's why I started snickering, because that was
it can be unfortunate. It's very useful to or not useful, but sometimes it's a good idea to really take your roof level or something.
Exactly. Yep. So I don't know. Do we want to switch the audio over to Bulba's? I forget.
We might.
I
don't know if it's a huge deal either way, but I just feel like Bulba's game is just kind of laughing at Wasp, because just keeps giving Bulba these diamonds over and over and over again. Just kind of like, and then of course Wasp doesn't get like enough money, so it's just funny to see. Finishing up 5-8.
Yeah, nice clean 5-8. Didn't quite get the Doom out as quickly as would have been possible, but did a nice job sort of playing a little bit conservatively, not losing control of the level or wasting a Doom or something that could have cost a lot more time. So that's very good. So
sadly we don't have the looks like Bulba had to restart the level. So what did we just say?
Yep.
And
15-second.
Sadly, we don't have to. We don't get to use the Melon Polt right away on 5-9. We have to wait until 5-10. But
everybody loves the Melon Polt, and the ice, the Winter Polt, the Winter Melon Polt. But unfortunately, again, just too expensive, and it does not have the DPS of the Gloomshroom strat. So the Gloomshroom is much better. Just overall, and 5-9. Looking at Bulba's screen,
probably the most technically difficult level in the entire.
Say the most technically difficult level in the game. It's what makes it interesting. You may notice we did not take the garlic. The garlic, is very nice because, as you can see on Wasp's screen, it sort of nicely feeds the zombies right into the middle and, pushes them into your glooms and into your DPS, and it's very safe. And, really 2 of your rows get dealt with for a very, very low cost. On 5-9, we used to take the gloom, but we found that it was faster to take the magnet, which you can see on Bulba's screen. The reason for that is that you really get a ton of really just a huge number of magnetic zombies, and so having the magnet to deal with those is faster than the additional benefit that you get from using the gloom. However, it's as a result more risky, because right now you can see on Bulba's screen, Bulba is only able to deal with 3 of the rows. He only has firepower in 3 of the rows, and now as he gets a bucket head in the bottom row, he's going to need to wait for the squash in order to deal with it, which again is, oh my goodness, did I just see Wasp get a diamond? Did the game really mock him that?
Oh my god. Wow, that's just a massive beautiful thing. You should go and buy the pool
gamers. I kind of thought that I was joking that this game, trolls you, that that it was that it was a problem, but I mean, oh my goodness,
I think just out of spite you should go and buy the pool cleaners.
I seriously, just go and or go buy the Gatling gun or the Cobb or something like that. Just show the game
being able to buy a Cobb on any percent round. That would be...
you could. You'd have to go and farm for 10 or 15 minutes. But anyway, so you can see Bulba. The danger in the strategy, as you can see right there, as he uses the squash, is that if you get cone heads in those more vulnerable rows, the Gloomstrom does not have quite enough DPS to deal with the glooms, to deal with the cone heads in time. And so as a result, we need to just make a couple of slight tweaks to the strategy in this level, just to make sure that those glooms don't get eaten until you get your 3rd one out, and they can sort of self-insure. They can sort of protect each other a little bit within the row, because 2 glooms is usually enough to kill a cone head in time. Although it's sometimes still nice to have a couple of fumes to back you up, just in case you get a couple of very fast cone heads as well. And you can see here Bulb beginning to plant some magnets. Again, very, very important, because we bring back the Jack-in-the-Box zombie. And as you might imagine, if the Jack-in-the-Box zombie is feeling particularly pesky, he can run right up against all 3 of the glooms and blow them up. That has happened to me not once but twice in some very, very good paced runs that I had before we started taking the magnet. So when you couple the Jack-in-the-Box zombie combined with the ladder zombie, you see the Jack-in-the-Box right there. Bulba's throwing out, and once that Jack-in-the-Box, once the actual box gets taken away because it's considered a magnetic piece of the zombie, then you're no longer in danger of the Jack-in-the-Box exploding.
Although they
So-
still kind of move fast and have a lot of HP. I have had like them take a
do.
significant chunk out of the gloom before.
They do. You're not totally risk-free because they are very fast, and they can potentially eat a gloom if you don't have quite enough protection out for that gloom just yet. Again, you can see Bulba planting. He's probably going to plant a fourth magnet here before too long, because it really is that important to get as many magnets out as you can, because the magnets only have a 3x3 radius that they can absorb. So if you've used up all your magnets in the top rows and then you start getting Jack-in-the-Boxes or bucket heads in the bottom rows, you can really be in you can really put yourself in a bit of trouble for sure. You also see Bulba planting some early dooms, and that's because you have the chance of not only getting a Gargantuar for the final wave, but you can get up to 2 more Gargantuars earlier in this third flag. So
Wasp made a slight misplay there. Very unfortunate.
Yep.
Accidentally planted a fume.
That's a tough one, But again, he has a pretty good placement. He's gotten slightly better early RNG on this level in terms of the zombies that have appeared, I would say, than Wasp did, than
I think
Bulba
at
did.
this point, it looks like it's going to be like the only, unless something else ridiculous goes wrong in 5-9, which it seems relatively unlikely because it seems like Bulba is a pretty strong setup. That ultimately. Bulba's just going to have to get a ridiculously bad Zomba. Wasp would have to get a ridiculously good one. But
that said, I have gotten some 6 to 6.5 minute Zombosses, and my gold split, which I actually just got earlier this week, was about 4 minutes and 12 seconds. So it is possible to have a 2 to 2.5 minute delta just on Zomboss alone. Again, the probability of that happening is extremely low. You can actually see right there, Bulba actually did get the early Gargantuar, the extra Gargantuar, but because of his foresight to plant that extra Doom, he's going to be able to deal with this final wave pretty effectively. But he doesn't have the squash, but he does have some firepower out. So you see him setting up another gloom right here, and the 2 glooms in the middle row should be able to deal with the Gargantuar coupled with the squash, and then that gloom in the bottom can definitely deal with those bottom zombies. So very, very well played from Bulba to be able to deal with that. Very unlikely, but still possible RNG that you can be hit with at the very end.
Imagine that. Not only beating someone in a race, but also bopping them in the same race. That's kind of that'd be very interesting to see.
That'd be very interesting. Bulba's probably on I'm going to guess a barely sub 3 hours 33 minute pace.
Ooh.
I forget what his PB is exactly. I can look it up.
I got it right here. It is a 333.17.
Bulba,
He would need a ridiculous Zomboss to get an Aaron bot, but I do think that it could potentially happen if he gets a good Zomboss.
It would be crazy.
Oh,
Bulba is on pace. Very likely, I would say 50% chance or maybe a little bit better that he's on pace to PB. And that would potentially, move him up in the leaderboards if he gets, really godly RNG. So again, this is very tense. I'm actually on the edge of my seat right now.
I would not say that Wasp did a bad job at all, though. He just got kind of dealt a worse hand, and definitely there were some critical moments that if he'd played them slightly differently, then it would have saved him a lot of time, like a couple of really bad final waves, and some other stuff like that. But stuff like the money and 310 and the money were the 2 biggest in this run.
This was 2 instances of, in my opinion, the main difference in the run was 2 instances of RNG and 2 instances of mistakes that were made on the waves. The first, being the money drop. Obviously, Bulba got more money, and that's, there's a little bit of skill. It's possible if you don't pick up the coins, they do eventually disappear, but mostly RNG on that one. And the other RNG, of course, being that dreadful 310 that he got that just absolutely ravaged him, and truly nothing he could have done about it. He played it very well. It just, it just really set him back.
That looked like some of my 310s.
It looks like one of my 310s from just a week or two ago. Yeah, it doesn't matter, how experienced you are with the run. There's potential for certain levels to go really well or really poorly, and not a lot that you can do about it. But the instances of play that I would say were the big mistakes. One was about a 15-second mistake that he made on 3-5 by misplanting one of the cherry bombs.
That was also very unfortunate.
Yep. I'd say another slight misplay was he was not quite prepared enough for not having enough money on 5-6. He sort of tinkered around with
it took him like 30 extra seconds to figure that out. But I don't think that made any difference at that point, because Bubba ultimately would have needed to make a mistake of some variety in the second half of World 5 anyway, and that mistake didn't really happen.
Exactly.
Even though there was that minor restart, I think that wasn't a huge deal. It was
it's insane. These runners were 1 second apart going into 3-9. 1 second, 2 hours into the run, they were 1 second apart. And again, just a few mishaps, a little bit of RNG.
Wasp is now in Zomboss. So.
Yep, Wasp is in Zomboss, and Bulba is a little more than half done Zomboss. So again, it would take some kind of completely unforeseen disaster, particularly where he has the roof cleaners.
That is a really bad bust, though. That was about the worst possible bust he could have gotten. So it might harm his chances for PB, potentially there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he may not get. We refer to Zomboss as either as by
he might still
PB the number of cycles that it takes. So you can only damage Zomboss when he's leaning over, and so it's very important to unleash all of your jalapenos, your ice shrooms to hold them in place. Really try to maximize those. So we refer to the speed of the Zomboss fight, obviously by the final time, which is the most important thing, but by the number of cycles that it takes, i.e. the number of times that Zomboss needs to lean over in order for you to defeat him. That can be anywhere from a 3 cycle, which is extremely rare, probably happens less than 10% of the time, even for very
this is quite the onslaught right here.
Exactly, and it can be all the way up to a 6 cycle if you just you really have some bad RNG, which honestly Bulba kind of has at this point, and or if you kind of misplay your plants and don't use the optimal don't use the optimal amount of you don't use the right plants at the right time. Bulba's going to be so close to getting this 4 cycle. I think he needs one more jalapeno. I think he's got it. It's coming right down to the end here. He's going to do a little more damage, and he does to Zomboss, and he's going to get a personal best by over 30 seconds.
That is a bop, too. That is going to be a bop of Wasp. Not there.
Him when he picks up
resting on his laurels.
When he picks up the Golden Sunflower. So I think that was about a 3:32. 42 for Bulba. A truly incredible time that
very good. Very good.
Would have been a world record only about a year ago, believe it or not. And again, we've seen some improvements and some strategy changes and things like that, but truly an absolutely excellent time from Bulba. He did muster in that 4 cycle at the very end, just really using using his plans very wisely during Zomboss at the end there. Honestly, Wasp has had a pretty good Zomboss fight so far too. Not quite as many jalapenos as maybe you'd like to see, and not as many melon pults either, but really doing a good job, kind of making the most of those plants as he can. He should be coming in, my guess would be right in the 335, maybe just below 336 type of marker. So even though it's several minutes difference between their time, again, it so much of this has just been down to a few critical moments, whether it was RNG moments or mistakes in execution that the runners made. Really, very few major mistakes from Bulba, I would say. He did a good job reacting to some bad RNG that he got in 5-9. A couple of mistakes, I saw earlier in the pools, maybe a misclick or a few instances where things weren't quite as optimal, but really very, very well played by him. As much as you could have hoped for, particularly under a higher pressure, race setting like this. It's just really, again, I can't underemphasize that this is not an easy game. It's not an auto scroller. Again, we estimate that there are 5,000 decisions that you need to make during the run. And that's not a decision like, do I plant a sunflower at the very beginning? That's, what plant do I plant and where? Do I hold off for a little longer to get more sun so I can do this? Do I speed along this wave at the risk that a future wave may not be quite as fast? How do I react for the small chance that this low probability event happens while still, trying to get, as fast and as best a time as I possibly can? There's so many decisions that are needed to be made in this run that, again, it really is one of a kind. Within the speed running world, again, a nearly infinite skill cap in terms of how good decisions you make. You can actually see Wasp getting some more bad RNG right here. Zomboss has basically a random amount of time that he spends in his leaning over stage, and he spent a very, very long time on that next to final wave. It looks like Wasp, with some excellent play here, is going to come in the sub 336. Again, a very, very strong time for him. Only a couple minutes off a PB. And again, when we're looking at it overall, we have a 3.5 hour run, and both runners, really were within probably 1 to 2% of their PB time. Again, really great execution from them. I can't give them kudos enough. They really did an absolutely fantastic job. Under pressure, under some, kind of high, low probability events that they both had to deal with. It was really, really very, really very intense, but very, very well played. We had several different lead changes, going into all the levels, leading up right into 310. Really could have been anyone's game, but again, really well played by both runners. It looks like Bulba actually did not pause his timer right at the very end, but Bulbasaur Represent was our winner. I really hope that you'll consider giving both of them a follow if you're into anything Plants vs. Zombies.
I gotta go and jump in and give my Twitch Prime sub in there. All right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We promised, both of us sort of promised a Twitch Prime sub. Mine's coming up tomorrow, actually. But give the Twitch Prime subs to the winners. To the winner, even though again they both deserve it. Again, please consider giving them a follow, or if you'd like to follow Super or myself. Right now I'm listed as number 1 on the leaderboards for any percent. Although we've had some, we did have a previous time that was better than that was removed due to the runner's personal choice. But regardless of that, there is again we all tend to run all of the categories now and again, whether you like the mini games, you like this any percent. And what's really great about this is it's just such a chill game. So right now, you can put it on in the background. Although we did have a
so we should probably invite both of the runners in for a little bit of a post-run interview real quick.
So runners potentially turn down their volume on Speed Gaming itself. I can hear a little bit of feedback coming in there, but
yes,
put it on in the background. Something like that.
Pretty sure it's not for me because I have all the streams muted at this point.
As do I.
Hi.
Hi, Bulba. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Very nice job on the PB as well.
I can't believe I actually PB'd, especially with what seemed like a very bad early game. Like, it was post 32 minutes, which wasn't very good for me, but because
what do you feel like were some of the highlights and some of the lowlights in terms of either your play or just sort of the race in general?
I forgot the wake on 3-6, which meant I didn't have it for 3-6, 3-10, or 4-1, and I also forgot to get the magnet instead of the garlic in 5-9, so I had to reset the level for that.
Yeah.
All right. And Wasp, are you here as well, or?
Yeah, I'm here. All
right. So yeah, definitely very unfortunate that you had a couple just instances of very unfortunate RNG and a couple major mistakes that I think made a large difference in the ending time. And it's very sad that I thought that, right after both of you got the dime, okay, money's not going to play a huge role in this run, but then the drops were pretty bad, and it was just pretty unfortunate to see.
Yeah, I was noticing it throughout that entire run. I just kept dropping money. It was just really unfortunate there. It was just my mistake there. But yeah, some of the RNG there was absolutely brutal, especially in like 3.5 and 3.10 especially.
310 was ridiculous, and 3.5 was probably the worst number of pea shooters that I've seen on that level in at least a very long.
I don't know if you were
Yeah.
listening to the stream, Bulba, but Wasp only had 2 pea shooters about 3/4 of the way through 3.5, and then just unfortunately happened to miss a cherry bomb right towards the end. So he had a pretty good lead at that point, but again, just a little bit of bad RNG there. And also, Wasp did get a diamond, but was $110 short for affording the Gloom anyway on 5-6. So a couple of real devastating moments of RNG, in addition to having a horrendous 310 with no 3-peaters and just really, really bad luck there. But yeah, it was really back and forth. You guys were 1 second away from each other going into 3-9. You almost clicked on the tall nut plant at exactly the same time. It was truly like it was back and forth so often in the early part of the run and through the pool levels, and then 310 happens, and things just sort of started to slip away a little bit. But really, I can't commend you guys both enough. You did a fantastic job, really recovering from your mistakes, keeping the grind up, kind of adjusting for the RNG on the fly. I mean, I thought you guys did absolutely terrific.
Absolutely. And I do want to give a great thanks to Speed Gaming for hosting another one of these races. And I also think that we probably should be getting going pretty soon to make way for the next event going on here, which I believe is something involving Metroid. So definitely stick around if you want to see that. So congratulations again to both runners. Very strong race. And you should probably leave you with that. Definitely check us out on speedrun.com, and we also have a Discord as well.
We have a Discord. You find us on all of our runs on speedrun.com. Again, our Discord, and again, really thank you for those of you that stuck around, whether it's part of the time or all the time. Huge shout out to Speed Gaming and to all of our runners. And again, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and that your views of Plants vs. Zombies as a boring auto scroller has been turned on its head, because it really is truly a fantastic speed game that's unlike anything else that I watch and that I think exists in the speedrunning community.
Throughout the
All
stream,
right.
I was listening, and it actually was a detriment to me at one point, because if you notice at 4-3, I actually went into the menu and changed the volume so I could hear it.
Oh, yeah.
instead.
I remember seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
All right. Well, very good. Again, take care, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I'm Warmac Gaming. My co-caster was A Super.
That's
And
me.
you can also find Bulbasaur represent the winner of today's race in the Mad Wasp. Again, another top runner in our community. We all tend to focus mostly on Plants vs. Zombies speedruns, but we really love anything strategy, anything speedrunning. So
yes.
feel free to hit us up. And again, huge thanks to Speed Gaming again. And take care, everyone. Have a good day. Again, congrats, Bulba, and very, very well run to you, Mad Wasp.
All right. See everyone later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We really love anything strategy, anything speedrunning. So
yes.
feel free to hit us up. And again, huge thanks to Speed Gaming again. And take care, everyone. Have a good day. Again, congrats, Bulba, and very, very well run to you, Mad Wasp.
All right. See everyone later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.